Let My People Go Surfing. The Education of a Reluctant Businessman. By Yvon Chouinard, founder and owner, Patagonia, Incorporated. Introduction. I've been a businessman for almost 50 years. It's as difficult for me to say those words as it is for someone to admit being an alcoholic or a lawyer. I've never respected the profession. It's business that has to take the majority of the blame for being the enemy of nature, for destroying native cultures, for taking from the poor and giving to the rich, and for poisoning the earth with the effluent from its factories. Yet business can produce food, cure disease, control population, employ people, and generally enrich our lives. And it can do these good things and make a profit without losing its soul. That's what this book is about. Like many people who had their formative years in the 60s in America, I grew up with disdain for big corporations and their lackey governments. The typical young Republican's dream of making more money than his parents or of starting a business, growing it as fast as possible, taking it public, and retiring to the golf courses of leisure world has never appealed to me. My values are a result of living a life close to nature and being passionately involved in doing what some people would call risky sports. My wife, Melinda, and I and the other contrarian employees of Patagonia have taken lessons learned from these sports and our alternative lifestyle and applied them to running a company. My company, Patagonia, Incorporated, is an experiment. It exists to put into action those recommendations that all the doomsday books on the health of our home planet say we must do immediately to avoid the certain destruction of nature and collapse of our civilization. Despite near universal consensus among scientists that we are on the brink of an environmental collapse, our society lacks the will to take action. We're collectively paralyzed by apathy, inertia, or lack of imagination. Patagonia exists to challenge conventional wisdom and present a new style of responsible business. We believe the accepted model of capitalism that necessitates endless growth and deserves the blame for the destruction of nature must be displaced. Patagonia and its 1,000 employees have the means and the will to prove to the rest of the business world that doing the right thing makes for good and profitable business. This book has been in process for 15 years because it's taken that long to prove to ourselves that we can break the rules of traditional business and make it not just work but work even better, especially for a company that wants to be here for the next 100 years. Philosophies. The philosophies are an expression of our values as they apply to different parts of the company. Our philosophies for design, production, distribution, image, human resources, finance, management, and the environment are each written specifically to guide Patagonia through the process of designing, manufacturing, and selling clothing. But they can be applied to any other kind of business as well. For instance, we use our design guidelines for making clothing as the basis of our philosophy of architecture and building. What good does having a fixed set of written philosophies accomplish when everything else in the business world is so dynamic? How does Patagonia follow its philosophies in light of the expanding internet market, the effects of NAFTA and GATT, dozens of technological leaps that significantly affect design and production, new and different employee demographics, and the ever-changing styles and lifestyles of customers? The answer is that our philosophies aren't rules. They're guidelines. They're the keystones of our approach to any project, and although they are set in stone, their application to a situation isn't. In every long-lasting business, the methods of conducting business may constantly change, but the values, the culture, and the philosophies remain constant. At Patagonia, these philosophies must be communicated to everyone working in every part of the company, so that each of us becomes empowered with the knowledge of the right course to take, without having to follow a rigid plan or wait for orders from a boss. Living the values and knowing the philosophy of each part of the company align us all in a common direction, promote efficiency, and avoid the chaos that comes from poor communication. We have made many mistakes during the past decade, but at no point have we lost our way for very long. We have the philosophies for a rough map, the only kind that's useful in a business world whose contours, unlike those of the mountains, change constantly and without much warning. Product design philosophy. Make the best product, cause no unnecessary harm. The first part of our mission statement, make the best product, is the raison d'etre of Patagonia and the cornerstone of our business philosophy. Striving to make the best quality product is the reason we got into business in the first place. We are a product-driven company, and without a tangible product there would obviously be no business, and the other goals of our mission statement would thus be irrelevant. Having quality, useful products anchors our business in the real world and allows us to expand our mission. Quality and surfboards. When my son, Fletcher, was a teenager, I told him it didn't matter to me what he wanted to do for work in the future as long as he also learned some sort of craft that involved working with his hands. He chose shaping surfboards, which was a good fit since he is slightly dyslexic, and dyslexics often have a great sense of proportion. They make good sculptors. A few years later, after he had decided to devote his life's work to making surfboards, I tried to encourage him to make better surfboards. "I can't do that," he said. "I can't make a better board than Al or Rusty. They make the best boards. They perform the best." I said, "But if pro surfers go on a trip to Tahiti or Indonesia, they have to take 6 to 10 boards because they're going to break at least half of them. You call that good quality?" "But everyone's boards break like that," he answered. We realized that durability was not among the primary criteria for the overall quality of surfboards. In fact, surfboards were just a fashion item, because naive young victims often insist on buying the same style boards as the world champion. You can imagine how well that works for them. Once I persuaded Fletcher to make a better surfboard, he had to identify all the criteria that define quality and performance as they pertain to surfboards. For quality, he would first have to include all the elements that make up the aesthetics of the finish: no sand through on the glassing, no air bubbles, sharp pinstripes, etc. Then he would have to look at the traits affecting the board's durability, such as breaking strength, compression strength, heel pressure dings, resistance to ultraviolet degradation, strength of the fin boxes, water absorption by the foam, etc. Performance has a few major elements such as hull speed, turnability, and paddling characteristics. There are also some criteria more difficult to define, like responsiveness and timbre and flex. Next, Fletcher had to research all kinds of different foams, various kinds of wood and other materials for the board's stringers, fiberglass cloths, and resins for the exterior. Hundreds of panels were made and tested for strength, lightness, flex, resistance to delamination. At the same time, he had to shape thousands of boards until he was confident that it wouldn't be his shaping skill that held him back. The end result is that his boards are lighter, stronger, perform as well as, and last much longer than other surfboards. Even though the average surfer still doesn't understand or demand quality in his or her surfboards, Fletcher does. Why? See. Because we had a history of making the best climbing tools in the world, tools that your life is dependent on, we couldn't be satisfied making second-best clothing. Our clothes, from baggies to flannel shirts, from underwear to outerwear, have to be the best of their kind. Trying to make the best product also inspires us to create the best child care center and the best production department and to be the best at our jobs. Make the best is a difficult goal. It doesn't mean among the best or the best at a particular price point. It means make the best, period. What makes a product the best of its kind? Early in our history, our chief designer for many years, Kate Laramendi, issued me a challenge. She said that we didn't make the best clothing in the world, and moreover, if we did, we'd go out of business. Why? I asked her. Because the best shirt in the world is Italian, she said. It's made from hand-woven fabric, with hand-sewn buttons and buttonholes, and impeccably finished. And it costs $300. Our customers wouldn't pay that. I asked, what would happen if you threw that $300 shirt into your washer and dryer? Oh, you'd never do that. It would shrink. It has to be dry cleaned. To me, a shirt that has to be treated so delicately has diminished value. Because I think ease of care is an important attribute, I would never own a shirt like that, much less make and sell one. If my design chief and I could view quality so differently, then clearly we had to hash out what criteria we should consider for Patagonia. Webster's defines quality as a degree of excellence, and of course the best quality would be the highest degree. Some people believe that quality is subjective, that excellence for one person may be mediocrity for another. But then they may be thinking of taste, which means individual preference. My design chief and I finally had to agree that quality is absolutely objective and definable, otherwise we would never even be able to establish our design criteria. We ended up with a checklist of criteria for Patagonia's designers to consider, and the list applies equally to other businesses. With clearly defined quality criteria for all aspects of a product, it becomes a straightforward matter to judge which are the best clothes, or automobiles, wines, or hamburgers. Here are the main questions a Patagonia designer must ask about each product to see if it fits our standards. Is it functional? It may be that someday fashion historians will credit Patagonia for inspiring men to go beyond gray sweatshirts and wear colorful clothes in the outdoors, but what I hope they remember is that we were one of the first to apply industrial design principles to clothing design. The first precept of industrial design is that the function of an object should determine its design and materials. Every design at Patagonia begins with a functional need. A piece of thermal underwear must wick and breathe and dry quickly. A paddling jacket has not only to repel and seal out water but also to allow a full range of arm movement. Function must dictate form. In the fashion business, design often begins with the fabric, and then a use is thought up for it. At Patagonia, the fabric is often the last item to be chosen, although a new fabric can also spark innovation for products, as when I stumbled on those polyester football jerseys and saw the potential for underwear. The superficial aspects of a fabric are not important, rather, we're interested in the substance. Even with sportswear, we start with functional considerations. Is this shirt needed for hot, tropical or hot, dry weather? What kind of drape or fit does it require? Does it need to be loosely woven to dry quickly or densely enough to blunt a mosquito's sharp proboscis? Only after we determine a product's functional need do we begin researching fabrics. From the other end, our fabric department is always working to create fabrics from materials that cause less harm, such as hemp, bamboo, and recycled polyester, and then we incorporate them into the line. Designing from the foundation of filling a functional need focuses the design process and ultimately makes for a superior finished product. Without a serious functional demand, we can end up with a product that, although it may look great, is difficult to rationalize as being in our line, that is, who needs it? Is it multifunctional? Why buy two pieces of gear when one will do the work of both? Making products as versatile as possible derives from our origins as mountain climbers who had to haul our gear up the mountain on our backs, not in the trunk of an SUV. Besides, to carry as little as possible in the mountains is a spiritual tenet of many outdoor enthusiasts, as well as a practical consideration. John Muir liked to limit his supplies to a tin cup, a loaf of stale bread, and an overcoat. Now it's an environmental consideration as well. Everything we personally own that's made, sold, shipped, stored, cleaned, and ultimately thrown away does some environmental harm every step of the way, harm that we're either directly responsible for or is done on our behalf. All the more reason, when we consider the purchase of anything, to ask ourselves, both as producers and consumers, is this purchase necessary? Do I really need a new outfit to do yoga? Can I do well enough with something I already have? And will it do more than one thing? We used to make a small rock climbing pack that had a thin foam pad in the back for comfort. The pad was removable so you could take it out and sit on it on cold bivouacs. My climbing partner broke his arm in a fall in the Tetons, and I was able to make a perfect splint with a sheet of foam and a few accessory straps. The more you know, the less you need. The experienced fly fisherman with only one rod, one type of fly, and one type of line will always outfish the duffer with an entire quiver of gear and flies. I never forget Thoreau's advice. I say beware of all enterprises that require new clothes. Sometimes a product designed for one activity turns out to work surprisingly well for another. A substantial percentage of the climbing jackets we make end up on the ski slopes rather than granite walls, even though we tailor our marketing efforts to climbers. We try to keep anomalies like that in mind. The best products are multifunctional, however you market them. If the climbing jacket you bought to ski in can also be worn over your suit during a snowstorm in Paris or New York, we've saved you from having to buy 2 jackets, one of which would stay in the closet 9 months of the year. Buy less, buy better. Make fewer styles, design better. Still, we also make some narrow-use, sport-specific products for climbing and skiing: jackets, fly fishing, vests, jackets, waders, boots, surfing, shorts, and paddling. Lotus designs jackets, dry tops, life vests. We do so for 2 reasons. First, for the sports we serve, we want to outfit our customers from cap to socks, and this is part of our bond with the customer. The second reason is credibility. To be respected as an outfitter to skiers or fly fishers, we make the critical products that show we know what we're doing: the best ski jackets, the best fishing vests. Is it durable? This question also derives from our origins in climbing gear, which has to stand up to hard, prolonged use, and has become a factor in our environmental philosophy as well. Because the overall durability of a product is only as good as its weakest element, the ultimate goal should be a product whose parts wear out at roughly the same time and only after a long life. You may notice that a great product like Levi's jeans will get a hole in the knee at about the same time you notice a hole in the rear or in the pocket. Conversely, the worst examples for wear range from electronics equipment, which have become virtually disposable when one element fails, to a pair of pricey swim shorts whose elastic waistband loses its stretch from the chlorine in pools while the rest of the garment still looks new. Technically, those shorts, as well as the electronics equipment, can be repaired, but because the cost of repair is too high relative to the original purchase price, the product usually gets junked. Someone once said that the poor can't afford to buy cheap goods. You can buy a cheap blender that will burn out the first time you try to grind some ice cubes, or you can wait until you can afford a quality one that will last. Ironically, the longer you wait, the less you may have to spend. At my age, it's becoming easier to buy only products that will last a lifetime. Some of our customers will not give up on their Patagonia clothes until it becomes a matter of indecency, like a favorite pair of jeans. Kathy Metcalf: to get all the components of a Patagonia product to be roughly equal in durability, we test continually in both the lab and the field. We test until something fails, strengthen that part, then see what fails next, strengthen that, etc., until we're confident that the product is durable as a whole. There's always going to be a need for repairs, and we make sure that they're possible. A zipper should be replaceable without the entire coat having to be taken apart. Does it fit our customer? People who aren't in the clothing business can count themselves lucky not to have the problem of fit. The way a company sizes clothes, what you call a small or a medium, whether you design for physically fit people or those who aren't, will always satisfy some customers and distress and turn away others. At Patagonia, we pattern our sizes to our core customers, who are active and in better shape than the average snowmobiler or bait fisherman. This may mean we lose potential customers in order to keep our core customers happier. So be it. Fit should also be consistent throughout the line. Someone who wears a medium in one style shirt should expect to wear a medium in another style. Any piece of clothing should fit right off the shelf without washing, and it should not shrink over its lifetime. Functional clothing poses other questions of fit that have to be carefully thought through. Will the product be worn over other layers or against the skin? A product designed with a close fit for climbing may also be worn by snowboarders or skiers who want a looser fit. In that case, the climber, as the core customer for that product, wins. The snowboarder or casual use customer can size up if she or he wants to. Koshun Miyamoto once complimented his fencing teacher's wife on the beauty of her gravel garden, a square of coarse-grained sand, set off by 3 stones from a nearby stream that conveyed a powerful, evocative image of space and balance. The fencing teacher's wife protested that the garden wasn't complete and wouldn't be until she could express the same feeling it has now, using only 1 stone instead of 3. The functionally driven design is usually minimalist. Or as Dieter Rams, head of design at Braun, maintains, good design is as little design as possible. Complexity is often a sure sign that the functional needs have not been solved. Take the difference between the Ferrari and the Cadillac of the 1960s. The Ferrari's clean lines suited its high-performance aims. The Cadillac really didn't have functional aims. It didn't have the steering, suspension, torque, aerodynamics, or brakes appropriate to its immense horsepower. But then nothing about its design really had to work. All it had to do was convey the idea of power, creature comfort, of a living room floating down the highway to the golf course. So, to a basically ugly shape were added all manner of useless chrome gingerbread, fins at the back, breasts at the front. Once you lose the discipline of functionality as a design guidepost, the imagination goes amok. Once you design a monster, it tends to look like one too. A great mountain jacket does not look like a 1960s Cadillac decked out in fabric. Stronger, lighter fabrics eliminate the need for ballistics cloth reinforcements at the shoulders and elbows. Newer, more breathable fabrics let us do away with the heavy, awkward pit zips once necessary for ventilation. Make the front zipper sufficiently watertight, and you can dispense with the weight and bulk of a protective wind flap. Is the product line simple? Some choices are simple. Do you want your goat cheese plain or with chives? But most choices for consumers aren't that simple. Few of us have the time, patience, or knowledge to order from a 12-page Chinese restaurant menu or to choose among 100 pairs of seemingly identical skis in a ski shop. People have too many choices these days. They are tired of constantly having to make decisions, particularly when it takes a major effort to make intelligent decisions, that is, knowing the difference between all the breathable, waterproof fabrics. For most people, separating the men's styles from the women's is hard enough. The best restaurants in the world have set menus, and the best ski shops have already decided which skis are best for your skill level. Since function comes first at Patagonia, we avoid the smorgasbord approach. We don't systematically rip off our competitors' most popular styles to end up with 20 functionally identical ski pants. Nevertheless, from time to time our own line gets too big, the differences between products become too small. When that happens, we know that Patagonia is not living up to its own philosophy. When we're doing our job right, each style of ski pant has a distinct purpose. We make each in a good range of sizes, including women's, and offer just enough colors. Then we work in long-term partnership with a contractor to produce those pants as efficiently as possible year after year. Along the way we make periodic, mostly incremental improvements that render the product simpler and lighter, more durable, more breathable, more agile. Our constancy tells the customers that we believe in our products, that they are the best we know how to make. When we deviate from our philosophy, for whatever reason, we pay a steep price. In the fall of 1991 we offered men and women's flannel shirts in 25 different patterns and colors. The idea was to make them in equal but limited quantities and let the customers decide which ones they preferred. The best sellers we would quickly reorder, and the dogs we would put on sale. But we neglected to take into account the cost of having to design, produce, warehouse, and catalog a product that required 125 stock-keeping units. We had no equation showing us the exponentially greater amount of time each pattern would add to our work. If a proliferation of colors and patterns drains profit, think what a mushrooming of styles can do. We've worked out an interesting formula. Each product Patagonia adds to the line, without dropping an old one, requires the hiring of 2.5 new people. The best performing firms make a narrow range of products very well. The best firms' products also use up to 50% fewer parts than those made by their less successful rivals. Fewer parts mean a faster, simpler, and usually cheaper, manufacturing process. Fewer parts mean less to go wrong, quality comes built in. And although the best companies need fewer workers to look after quality control, they also have fewer defects and generate less waste. In business heaven we shall all have businesses making simple products like WD-40, or bottled water that we could sell for 2 to 4 times as much as gasoline. Is it an innovation or an invention? There are 2 types of creativity, the creativity of making 0 to 1, and the creativity of making 1 to 1,000. Kazuhiko Nishi, the Steve Jobs of Japan. When I die and go to hell, the devil is going to make me the marketing director for a cola company. I'll be in charge of trying to sell a product that no one needs, is identical to its competition, and can't be sold on its merits. I'd be competing head-on in the cola wars, on price, distribution, advertising, and promotion, which would indeed be hell for me. Remember, I'm the kid who couldn't play competitive games. I'd much rather design and sell products so good and unique that they have no competition. Successful inventing requires a tremendous amount of energy, time, and money. The big inventions are so rare that even the most brilliant geniuses think up only a few marketable inventions in their lifetimes. It may take 30 years to come up with an invention, but within a few years or months there can be 1,000 innovations spawned from that original idea. Innovation can be achieved much more quickly because you already start with an existing product idea or design. Surfing the Ventura Overhead, c. 1998. In the early 70s my surfboard shaper Greg Little and I designed this surf kayak. We started with the premise that we were surfers who wanted to ride a wave on a kayak as opposed to being kayakers who wanted to surf. Approaching the design from a surfer's perspective resulted in a unique 8-foot-long surf yak with 3 fins and a closed kayak deck on top. The RERP, or Realized Ultimate Reality Piton, was one of our few real inventions. It was made of tough chrome nickel steel and is used to chisel its way into incipient cracks. Some companies are based on having proprietary designs and patents, but far more successful ones are based on innovation. Just compare the success of the classic inventor country, the United States, with the ultimate innovator, Japan. Incorporated in the clothing fashion business especially, there is simply no time for long, drawn-out pure research. Patagonia didn't invent bunting fleece. The idea came from my seeing Doug Tompkins wearing a brushed wool fila pullover. Since it could only be dry cleaned, it was impractical for outdoor use. But it spawned an idea that led to polyester bunting, cinchilla, and a host of micro fleeces. We adapted the design for stand-up shorts from a pair of double-seated English corduroy shorts, and the idea for our very successful baggies came from a pair of nylon shorts I spotted in an Oxnard department store. The ultimate Patagonia versions are more functional, durable, and far superior to the knocked-off originals, especially for their intended active outdoor use. Like creative cooks, we view originals as recipes for inspiration, and then we close the book to do our own thing. The inspirations for some of our best designs are like the fusion recipes of the best chefs. Is it a global design? You'll never know if you're making the best products in the world until they're sold and used all over the globe. But this creates challenges of its own. Imagine 2 companies, Tomatoes R Us and Acme Tomatoes. Both sell tomatoes worldwide. Tomatoes R Us grows all its tomatoes on huge agribusiness farms in California's San Joaquin Valley. Its product is square and firm, travels well, and can be easily ripened with ethylene gas after it reaches a foreign port and before it reaches the consumer. It can compete, sharply, on price worldwide because it has state-of-the-art machines, hybrid seeds, chemicals, and cost accountants, plus heavily subsidized public water and export subsidies. In contrast, Acme prefers to grow its tomatoes in the country in which they are sold, plum tomatoes for the Italian pasta market and juicy, vine-ripened tomatoes to the picky French. To me, Tomatoes R Us is merely a U.S. company doing international business. Acme, on the other hand, is a global company because it knows the importance of tailoring its products to specific markets. Patagonia is a California company. Our corporate culture, lifestyle, and design sense are still purely California. This helps us in some ways, because California is so polyglot and racially and culturally diverse. Where else could you find a Szechuan enchilada? But I would not yet define Patagonia as a global company until we learn to think, design, and produce beyond our present limits. When we become a global company, not just a business operating internationally, we'll adapt our designs toward local preferences, toward their functional need and sizing and color. We'll produce more locally and less centrally. Most important, thinking and acting more globally will open our minds to an endless possibility of new ideas, some of which we can adapt to use in our domestic market. The hottest place right now for surf fashion is Australia. For years I've been going to Japan for inspiration about all sorts of things. The Japanese import only the best of Western culture. The best blues music, Italian fashion design, and French wine all can be found in Tokyo. Is it easy to care for and clean? When we studied the environmental impacts of clothing throughout its life cycle, that is, fabric manufacture, dyeing, construction, distribution, care by the consumer, and disposal, we were surprised to find that two of the biggest villains were transportation and cleaning. In particular, we found that the post-sale care of a clothing product caused as much as 4 times the amount of harm as the entire manufacturing process. Also, maintenance of any product is a chore, and for that reason alone, low maintenance becomes a criterion for high quality. At Patagonia none of us likes to iron or bother with the dry cleaners, and we assume that our customers don't either. We have practical reasons too. You should be able to wash travel clothes in a sink or in a cooking pot, then hang them out to dry in a hut and still look decent for the plane ride home. But environmental concerns trump all others. Ironing is an inefficient use of electricity, washing in hot water wastes energy, and dry cleaning uses toxic chemicals. Machine drying, far more than actual wear, shortens the life of a garment. Just check the lint filter. The most responsible way for a consumer and a good citizen to buy clothes is to buy used clothing. Beyond that, avoid buying clothes you have to dry clean or iron. Wash in cold water. Line dry when possible. Wear your shirt more than 1 day before you wash it. Consider faster drying alternatives to 100% cotton for your travel clothes. Does it have any added value? A study by Dr. Thomas M. Power at the University of Montana states that only 10 to 15% of the money Americans spend on goods and services is necessary for survival. You don't need to eat filet mignon to be healthy, you don't need to live in a 4,000 square foot house to be sheltered, and you don't need a pair of $50 surf trunks in order to go in the water. People spend the other 85% to 90% of their money for upgrades in quality. They'll pay extra for the added value of a pound of filet mignon over a pound of hamburger, even though either one would meet their nutritional needs. Unlike those who made claims in the Cola Wars, we do add real value. We make durable, high-quality goods that function well outdoors. We design everything we make to be the best of its kind, and whatever doesn't measure up goes back to the drawing board. Moreover, we carefully define, rather than just assert, what makes each product the best of its kind. Durability and low environmental impact make that list. Fleeting fashion and the illusion of luxury do not. We treat customers with respect too. Customer phone service as a rule has become so terrible in this country, thanks to transaction quotas, intentionally long hold times, and managerial indifference, that it would be easy to shine without much effort, if only because we don't farm out phone calls to a service bureau in Delhi. But we make the extra step anyway. We have an ironclad guarantee, and we honor it, even if we have to go to great lengths. As an example, a customer once returned a well-used, very old pair of pants, hoping they could be repaired. They were well beyond repair, and we made the mistake of discarding them. The customer was not happy. She wanted her favorite pair of pants back, whatever shape they were in. We offered her a replacement pair, in a newer, improved style, no charge, but she wanted the same style and color as the pair she had sent us. Fair enough. We went to the archives, found the pattern, then managed to find a bolt of the right fabric in the right color. Before long the customer had her old-style pants back, now brand new. After climbing Denali, Rick Ridgway and I celebrated by going down to Homer, Alaska, a quaint little drinking village with a fishing problem, to dig for razor clams. After this photo appeared in our catalog, we received a letter from Robert Mondavi, who had identified that we had been drinking his wine. Rather than send a cease and desist letter, he thanked us and invited us up to a VIP tour of the winery. Not every customer service transaction is so involved or costly, but we do know that the extra steps we take are worth the trouble. Our catalog reorder rate from customers, season after season, far exceeds the mail-order industry standard. In fact, it's off the charts. As in the case of the pants that couldn't be allowed to die, the value of our products sometimes seems to grow over time. In Tokyo there are stores that deal only in vintage Patagonia clothing. In 1998, I was at the opening celebration of our store in Shibuya, Tokyo, with 200 or 300 of our best customers enjoying the drinks and sushi. Suddenly the room went quiet except for the sucking through the teeth sound the Japanese make to indicate shock or pleasure. A young fellow had made a grand entrance wearing an old Patagonia jacket. Everyone in the room knew that the jacket was a 1979 bar glide pile and that he had paid a fortune for it. The Patagonia label is evocative and valued in the marketplace. But we don't use it as a crutch for mediocre design. A product independent of the label should stand on its own merits and not rely on the label to carry it. The product must be intrinsically valuable in its own right. A Patagonia product should be identifiable even from a distance by the quality of workmanship and attention to detail. The Zen master would say a true Patagonia product doesn't need any label. Is it authentic? I once saw someone wearing a sweatshirt that said authentic on the chest, and nothing else. The fashion industry is so caught up with this idea of authentic that it has become another of those meaningless words. However, our customers expect us to make the real thing. Just as a field coat has to have a blood-proof, lined game pocket in the back, and work pants have to be made for real carpenters, roofers, and masons, if we offer a rugby shirt, it has to be made to play rugby in. We made a mistake in 1975, when we contracted out our rugby shirts to a fashion manufacturer in Hong Kong. We again made a mistake with rugby shirts in 2002. This time we brought back our rugby shirts, authentic in every way, rubber buttons, heavy, tough knit fabric, reinforced stitching everywhere, except we made them in fashionable color stripes. They didn't sell. They were not authentic rugby colors. We finally got it right in 2005. Is it art? Solving a serious functional need is not always required in our clothing designs, particularly in our sportswear. We don't always have to bow first to the god of pure function. Patagonia clothes should also be fun, and they can be art. Fashion is happening only now, and art is timeless. In fact, fashion is always passé because it is a response to an event in the past. It may recycle someday, but it will certainly be dead tomorrow. When I think about clothing as art, I imagine a Navajo Indian blanket coat worn by an 80-year-old woman. Her silver hair is tied back in a bun. She could be rich, she could be poor. She could have bought the coat in 1940, or it could have once belonged to her mother. The coat is authentic and a classic, not a modern version of a traditional blanket coat. It's a work of art. She could give the coat to her granddaughter, who could wear it for another 50 years, and it would still be in style. It is priceless. The difference between fashion and art is the difference between a 1950s Hawaiian shirt you can buy in a thrift shop for $1 and one you have to pay $3,000 for in a vintage Aloha shirt store. The former has bright colors and a Hawaiian design, while the latter has the aesthetic quality of a matched pocket and collar, the artistic qualities of the print, and the drape and feel of good fabric. One is junk, and one is art. It's the difference between illustration and art in painting. An illustrator becomes an artist when he or she can convey the same emotion with fewer brush strokes. Because of our commitment to quality, we run at such a slow pace that we're the turtles in the fashion race. Our design and product development calendar is usually 18 months long, too long even to be a contender in any new fads. We rarely buy off-the-shelf fabrics, and we don't buy existing prints, so we have to work with artists and design studios in producing original art. With our organic cotton products, we often have to begin the design and manufacturing process with bales of raw cotton. Then we have to conduct tests all through the process, from the fabric lab to the field. We need time to do our homework, showing the potential product to core customers, buyers, retail store employees, to see if it will sell or if we should even make it. Every time we try to chase fashion we end up being 6 months or a year too late, and we look stupid. Are we designing for our core customer? All our customers are not equal in our eyes. There are indeed some we favor more than others. These are our core customers, those for whom we actually design our clothes. To understand this more clearly, we can look at our customers as if they existed in a series of concentric circles. In the center, or core circle, are our intended customers. These people are the dirtbaggers who, in most cases, have trouble even affording our clothes. A couple of specific examples will help. Audrey Sutherland is an amazing Hawaiian grandmother. Her life revolves around long inflatable kayak trips, solo. She's logged more than 8,000 miles along the coasts of Alaska and British Columbia, 7,700 of which were solo, and thousands more miles in the Greek Isles, Scotland, and Hawaii. About paddling these trips alone she says, "You become so much more part of the natural world around you, you're communicating as if you were a rock or bush or a fish. You become part of the elements." Audrey's other advice: don't spend money on gear. Spend it on airplane tickets. Even in her 80s she continues to do serious trips in the North Pacific. When Dean Potter climbs the nose of El Capitan in Yosemite, he doesn't need to take along any rain gear because he's back in camp for lunch. As one of our product testers, though, he gives us great feedback on the gear he does use. People like Dean and our other climbing, surfing, kayaking ambassadors and the hundreds of professionals on our Pro Purchase program, which provides our product at a preferred rate to exceptional athletes and working outdoor professionals, are among the best in the world at what they do. They are the innovators, and their actions define the state of the art in their fields. Have we done our homework? Some people think we're a successful company because we're willing to take risks, but I'd say that's only partly true. What they don't realize is that we do our homework. A few years back when we switched midstream from polypropylene to Kaplan for our underwear fabric, we had done our fabric development, we had done our testing in the fabric lab. We made tops and bottoms with half the garment Kaplan and half polypropylene and extensively tested them in the field. We knew the market, and we were absolutely confident that it was the right thing to do. Patagonia Design routinely ventures into the unknown, where doing all your research still doesn't tell you yes or no and you have to make a decision. We took a chance on importing 20,000 pairs of reef walkers from Japan. They were tabis with felt soles for walking on slippery rocks, and we had to eat them. On the other side, we took a chance on changing from Polypro to Kaplan, and it worked. Miss or hit, the Patagonia design environment encourages individualism. Personal risk, whether it's climbing a mountain, taking on debts to develop a dream, or designing a product that surprises is a valued part of the Patagonia culture in general and of the design environment in particular. Market trends are less important than strong intuition. Although we encourage everyone at Patagonia to be gonzo, to stick his or her neck out, we don't want to become martyrs. You can think of martyrs as being victims, or you can think of them as just being people too far ahead of their time. The problem with risk-taking, of course, is that it's risky. Reef walkers were not a financial success. Kaplan was. You can minimize risk by doing your research and, most of all, by testing. Testing is an integral part of the Patagonia industrial design process, and it needs to be included in every part of this process. It involves testing competitors' products, quick and dirty testing of new ideas to see if they are worth pursuing, fabric testing, living with a new product to judge how hot the sales may be, testing production samples for function and durability, etc. And test marketing a product to see if people will buy it. Is it timely? If everyone thinks you have a good idea, you're too late. Paul Hawken. Business is a race to see who can be the first to bring a product to the customer, and inventions and ideas are often born simultaneously around the world by any number of unrelated individuals. It's almost as if every idea had its time. In 1971 at Chouinard Equipment we introduced our hexcentric style of climbing chocks. This was a big expenditure for us in dies and tooling because the chocks came in 10 sizes. After a few months on the market, a friend of ours, Mike Sherrick, gave us an idea about how they could be redesigned to be more versatile. Within 2 weeks a climber in Norway wrote to us with the same idea. We immediately scrapped all our tooling, invested in all new dies, and in 1972 came out with a new polycentric hexcentrics. Ironically, that very same month a competitor came out with exact copies of our old, and now obsolete, style of hexcentric chocks. In 1980 the average lifespan of a hard goods product was 3 years. Now it is 3 months or less. There is no time to do hard tooling anymore. You make a chip and put it on a computer-aided milling machine or lathe, and you can produce parts in hours instead of months or years. Being first offers tremendous marketing advantages, not the least of which is you have no competition. Coming in second, even with a superior product at a better price, is often no substitute for just plain being first. This doesn't mean we should be chasing trends or products. It applies more to discovering a new fabric or a new process. Again, the key word is discovering instead of inventing. There's simply no time for inventing. Maintaining a sense of urgency throughout a company is one of the most difficult challenges in business. The problem is further compounded by having to depend on outside suppliers who may not have the same sense of expediency. I constantly hear people giving lame excuses for why something is impossible or why a job didn't get done on time. Here are a few examples. I wish I could help you, but... How many times have you heard service persons say those words when you know they don't mean it and are just being lazy? I wish I could give you a baked potato instead of rice, but we have a no substitution policy here. Or, I wish we could do it, but our insurance policy won't allow it. Why not just do it anyway? Or get another insurance policy or don't even have insurance? Get out of the kitchen if you can't stand the heat. We can't get any more fabric, or aluminum or whatever. Substitute another material, try another mill or 50 or 100 mills. Try mills in other countries, call a competitor and find out where it get its fabric. I've called and called, but I can't get through. How many times have you really called? 3 or 4 times? Call 20 times. Or try a telegram or a registered letter. Or catch him at home with a 5 a.m. wake-up call. The computer screwed up. At least people didn't have this 150 years ago. Computers don't screw up, people screw up. Garbage in, garbage out. All the computer terminals are tied up. This may be true, but maybe the job could have been done on a typewriter or with a yellow number 2 Eberhard Faber. I didn't have the time or I've been too busy to answer your letter, to return your call, to write a weekly report, To clean my desk, whatever. This is a dishonest excuse. What the person really means is that the job didn't get done because it had the lowest priority, and in fact he may never return your call because he really doesn't want to. People do what they want to do. Lastly, impossible. The lamest of the lame excuses. Difficult maybe, or impractical, or too expensive, but rarely is anything impossible. To stay ahead of the competition, our ideas have to come from as close to the source as possible. With technical products, our source is the dirtbag core customer. He's the one using the products and finding out what works, what doesn't, and what is needed. On the contrary, sales representatives, shop owners, sales clerks, and people in focus groups are usually not visionaries. They can tell you only what is happening now, what is in fashion, what the competition is doing, and what is selling. They are a good source of information if you want to be a player in the cola wars, but the information is too old if you want to have leading-edge products. Does it cause any unnecessary harm? The responsibility for the quality of our clothing begins with the designers. Similarly, the second part of our mission statement, cause no unnecessary harm, is also largely the responsibility of the designers and production managers. Our ongoing environmental assessment of our materials and our manufacturing processes gives us information about the true effects of our business. Sometimes that information leads us to ask more questions, and sometimes we are left with a tug-of-war between the best quality and causing no harm. For instance, we took a quality hit in 1990, when we first used recycled paper in our catalog. But the next catalog was better, and now the recycled paper we use is perfectly adequate. Of course, we will never make clothes out of any industrial-grown cotton again. We will try not to use toxic dyes, we will try to use recycled materials, and we will seek to do business only with other responsible companies. But we can never be satisfied with our progress. Growing cotton, even organically, is still not the best use for valuable farmland. Recycling some of our wastes and making chinchilla jackets out of recycled soda pop bottles are not enough. We have to take responsibility for what we make, from birth to death and then beyond death, back to rebirth, what the architect, designer, and author Bill McDonough calls cradle to cradle. It means making a pair of pants out of infinitely recyclable polyester or a polymer like nylon 6 and, when it is finally worn out, melting down the pants to a resin and creating another pair from the same resin, over and over again. How to seed a dress. We have been driving for several hours up winding roads high into the mountains of China's Shaanxi province. I am here to visit the fields where our hemp is grown. Hemp farming is complex and difficult to understand without seeing it firsthand. At the end of this long, isolated road I expect to see no more than one field with a farmer. I am surprised to find an entire village in a flurry of activity. Most of the fields were harvested 3 weeks ago, but there is still a small one left standing, saved for my visit. This remote region of China is experiencing a drought, and the height of the crop is short this year. The hemp grown here is rain-fed. There is no irrigation, and no chemicals are used. This is the way it has always been done here. Fertilization comes compliments of the chickens and cattle that roam freely in the fields. These hemp farmers have no need for herbicides or insecticides. Most of the villagers are busy getting the hemp ready to be delivered to the mill that weaves our fabric. Bundles of hemp stand in the field to dry. Seeds are being separated from the stalks, which are then carried to the river and submerged for retting, a process that loosens the fiber from the woody pulp. I watch an old man who has obviously been submerging stalks for many seasons. He carefully finds a place where the water will move easily over the stalks, but not so deep that they can't be retrieved at the right time. The river is low this year, and it takes him a long time to find the right spot. Later in the season, when the retting is complete, the stable fibers will be separated from the stalks and delivered to the mill. I am amazed to witness an entire village working to produce the dress I am wearing today, from a seed. Jill Vlahos. If our future customers are going to send back their pets to us to be recycled when they are no longer usable, then the smart businessman would try to make his pants so they last as long as possible, because you really don't want to see all those pants come back very soon. In the final analysis, the best effort we can make toward causing no unnecessary harm is to make the best quality products, ones that are durable, functional, beautiful, and simple. Production philosophy. For centuries in Ireland, women hand-knit sweaters for their seafaring husbands. The bulky, cable-stitched wool was constructed to ward off harsh elements. Each woman used a recognizable, family-specific pattern of stitches, both to reflect love and pride, but also to be used as a means of identification if the husband were lost at sea and his body washed ashore. Unknown author. Patagonia of course can produce a lot more sweaters than can a single hand knitter working by lamplight in her cottage, on a bluff overlooking the sea. But she has a big advantage over us, a single set of eyes and hands determining the quality of her sweater. The challenge for Patagonia, or for any company serious about making the best product of its kind, is to recreate on an industrial scale the hand knitter's devotion to quality and her ability to keep in mind all the criteria for her final product, a task now spread across several continents in half a dozen companies. If you decide to make each of your products the best of its kind, you cannot hand off your pattern or blueprint or model to the lowest bid contractor and expect to get anything close to what you had in mind. When a product has your brand name on it, your recognizable, family-specific pattern of stitches, you must work closely and effectively with your suppliers and contractors to replicate that pattern perfectly. There are 6 production principles that I've found to be crucial to the faithful execution of our designs. When I had my blacksmith shop, I contracted out the tooling of our climbing gear, and some of the production, to Harold Leffler's machine shop in Burbank. Leffler was a draftsman and tool and die maker with 50 years hands-on experience. We called him the genius as often as we called him Harold. He was so good at his craft that he received requests from aircraft companies around the country to bid on their projects, even though he ran a small shop. Harold used to joke about the blueprints he received from engineers. They were so over-designed that the cost to produce them would be 10 to 20 times higher than necessary, and in many cases, they would be impossible to make at all. Because I had no training in engineering but did know what I wanted a carabiner or ice screw to do, I would show up with a simple sketch or a carved wooden model, or just an idea in my head, and we would work together to come up with a design that was feasible. Even after Tom Frost, a talented engineer and draftsman, became my partner, we consulted Harold Leffler at all stages of the design process. My relationship with Leffler taught me how important it is for the designer to work with the producer up front. This applies to every product. Building a house proceeds more smoothly and less expensively when the architect and contractor work out the real-world problems of a blueprint before the cement truck shows up to pour the foundation. Likewise, a rain jacket is better made when the producer understands from the start what the product needs to achieve and, conversely, when the designer understands what processes have to be followed and, finally, when everyone stays on the job and works as a team until it's done. Michael Kami refers to this team approach as concurrent, as opposed to assembly line manufacturing, in which responsibility for one part of the process is handed off in stages to the next in line. A concurrent approach brings all participants together at the beginning of the design phase. As Dr. Kami points out, only about 10% of a product's costs are incurred during the design phase, but 90% of the costs are irrevocably committed. The ongoing relationship beyond the design phase is critical too. Builders have been known to make on-site changes without knowing the architect's intentions, and sewing contractors can easily compromise a rain jacket's performance by altering construction of a seam to fit their own work habits and practices. Develop long-term relationships with suppliers and contractors. Patagonia has never owned a fabric mill or a sewing shop. To make a ski jacket, for instance, We buy fabric from a mill and trims like zippers and facings from other suppliers, and then we contract out the sewing. To work effectively on a single endeavor with so many other companies, with no compromise in product quality, requires a level of mutual commitment much deeper than the traditional business relationship. Mutual commitment requires nurture and trust, and those demand personal time and energy. Consequently, we do as much business as we can with as few suppliers and contractors as possible. The downside is the risk of becoming highly dependent on another company's performance. But that's exactly the position we want to be in because those companies are also dependent on us. Our potential success is linked. We become like friends, family, mutually selfish business partners. What's good for them is good for us. Of course, you have to choose such relationships carefully. The first thing we look for in a supplier or contractor is the quality of its work. If the standards aren't high already, we don't delude ourselves into thinking they'll be raised for us, no matter how attractive the price. It makes no business sense for a contractor to sew shorts for Costco one day and Patagonia the next. Contractors that sew on the lowest cost basis wouldn't hire sewing operators of the skill we require or welcome our oversight of their working conditions and environmental standards. On the other hand, high-quality fabric suppliers and sewing contractors often find us attractive as a business partner. They know that we recognize quality workmanship, skilled employees, and quality working conditions, and we'll pay a fair price. They know, from our reputation, that we'll do our best to establish a long-term relationship, to commit to fabric purchases, and to keep their sewing lines running at an even clip. When we find a good fit with a supplier or contractor, communication between us has to be as close as it is between departments of our company. Our production department has the responsibility to see that Patagonia's principles, and the specific design aims of each product, are communicated and understood at the mill or at the needle. Our contract managers must be Patagonia reps in every sense of the word, to convey our standards for product quality, environmental and social concerns, business ethics, and even our image as an outdoor company. I think of Patagonia as an ecosystem, with its vendors and customers as an integral part of that system. A problem anywhere in the system eventually affects the whole, and this gives everyone an overriding responsibility to the health of the whole organism. It also means that anyone, low on the totem pole or high, inside the company or out, can contribute significantly to the health of the company and to the integrity and value of our products. Weigh quality first, against on-time delivery and low cost. Every production department of every company has a mandate to deliver a quality product on time and at a reasonable cost. Although it's management's job to treat these three goals as complementary rather than contradictory, what does a company do when it must face a choice? Patagonia puts quality first, period. A more sales-driven company might sacrifice a degree of quality to achieve on-time delivery, and a mass marketer might sacrifice both quality and on-time delivery to maintain the lowest cost. But if you're committed to making the best products in the world, you can brook no allowance for fabrics that fade on the shelf or zippers that fail or buttons that fall off. Of course, if you do choose quality against on-time delivery or against paying a reasonable price, don't pat yourself on the back. You've already blown it. You have to strive constantly to achieve all three, but quality is more equal. Go for it, but do your homework. On our road trip to Patagonia in 1968, we stopped to cool off in a jungle river in Colombia. I dived headfirst off the bridge into the coffee-colored water and planted my head into a sandbar only a foot underwater. I felt a crack and was completely paralyzed, unable even to breathe for a long moment until my senses came back. Later I found that I had suffered a compression fracture of my neck. Well, that was a very risky and stupid act. However, it is possible to accomplish the goal of safely diving into this river, without compromising, if you take the time to learn how to dive off high places carefully and if you plumb the river to see if it's steep enough at the exact spot you plan to dive. Let me give you a hypothetical scenario. Jane Smith, who is the product line director for sportswear, decides that we have an opportunity to cut $1 off the cost of our baggies shorts without compromising on the quality. So production decides to pull them out of the factory where they have been made for years with acceptable quality and put them in a new factory it found in Panama. This seems like a pretty big risk to put 154,000 pairs of baggies in a factory we have never used before. In fact, it's stupid unless we do our homework. So we send people down to check out the factory, see how good the operators are and how they are treated, check out the management to see if it is honest, see if it has the right machines, make sure it understands our quality standards, and then we put our own quality control inspector in the factory during the entire first production run. Under these conditions, would you say the chance of making $150,000 extra profit on this product is worth the risk? I'd say so. Again, like the Zen approach to archery or anything else, you identify the goal and then forget about it and concentrate on the process. Let's take a close look at a loose button and the consequences depending on who happens to discover it. Say the button falls off in your customer's hand, as she pulls the pants out of the washing machine. Your entire company, and your partners, have failed in the grossest possible way. That hard-earned customer will never again fully trust your claim to quality. Better for a quality control inspector at your warehouse to make the discovery during a spot check when the goods arrive from the port. Then further checks can be made, and all the pants with loose buttons can be removed from their bags, and the bags from boxes, and all the pants sent over to the sewing room and all the buttons sewn on right, then moved to a staging area and rebagged and reboxed. Better, but expensive, no on-time delivery today. Better still to spy that loose button at the sewing machine, to work with your contractor to get all the operators to sew the thread through once more because the machines they're using don't lock the stitch properly. Their lines will move a little more slowly, but less harm is done. Best of all, by far, is to spot the problem with the sewing machine in advance, while you're making the first production sample run. Then you still have lots of options. You might decide, for instance, to purchase 5 old-fashioned lock-stitch machines for the contractor, for which he'll repay you overtime on a per-unit basis. That's exactly what we finally did in 1991, though we've suffered through all the other stages too. That suffering taught us that taking extraordinary steps to set up the manufacturing correctly the first time is much cheaper than taking extraordinary steps down the line. If you're committed to being the best, you're going to have to take those extra steps at some point in production anyway. It might as well be at the start. As this example shows, if you do want to get things right the first time, rigorous specs aren't enough. You have to be a full partner. You have to make sure that your suppliers and contractors have the necessary knowledge and tools to get the job done to your design standards. Getting to that point is not a problem if you and your working partners are mutually committed to the same standards. Obviously, we put a lot of effort into choosing factories that have healthy relationships with their employees. We audit potential partners to determine how they manage workers. We interview workers to determine their perspective on the factory, and we engage civil society to verify that the factory has a positive employment record. But sometimes that doesn't go far enough. Sometimes a factory that has a lot of components of a positive workplace will lack things that are obvious to us but foreign to them, simply because that benefit for workers or that management tool is new or unknown in that region. While it is important to start out working with factories that meet or try to meet our workplace standards, we also have to acknowledge that sometimes our partners need our help. As buyers, we have a lot of leverage with a factory, particularly if it is a long-standing partner, with which we have invested a lot of time and energy on quality work or production technology. We have to use that leverage and those relationships to improve working conditions as well as product quality. Doing so is for the good of the entire ecosystem. It's good for workers, good for factories, and good for us. This is an evolving process, and we are continuously learning. Things that we have always done, like screening new factories, are giving way to new ideas like training factory human resources managers to have some of the skills that our own HR team has. Throughout this process, we have done what we have done elsewhere in our business: we've begged, borrowed, or stolen the ideas of others. We are a member of the Fair Labor Association. We talk with other companies about their practices, and we ask our factories and workers to tell us what kind of help they most need. Most important, we've tried to teach everyone we work with to think the way we do, that the whole supply chain has to be a functioning, interconnected system. Because the world is changing, we can never assume that the way we have done things in the past is adequate for the future. We constantly evaluate the ideas of the moment for improving business processes, from MRP, materials resources plan, to just-in-time, to quick response, to self-managed teams, if we think these approaches may result in a better product delivered on time and at a reasonable cost. The drive for quality in production in any organization has to go beyond the products themselves. It extends to how we organize ourselves to get a body of work done, how we beg, borrow, and steal good ideas from other companies and cultures, and how we approach the question of the way things are and how they should be. That begins with an attitude of embracing change rather than resisting it. Not just changing without reflection and weighing the relative merits of the new ideas, but nonetheless assuming that if we only look hard enough, there may be a better way to do things. We should borrow and adapt ideas even from unlikely sources. McDonald's is as far from Patagonia as you can get in its image and many of its values. But one thing it does I respect. No one at McDonald's ever tells a customer, "Sorry, we're all out of iceberg lettuce today." It successfully organizes on-time delivery every day of the week, and I think Patagonia could learn a lesson from McDonald's and the symbiotic relationship it enjoys with its suppliers. Distribution philosophy. A clothing company of the size of Patagonia, if it is not diversified in its product line and operations, is as much at risk as a farming operation growing a monocrop. Only the diseases are different. Yet very few companies other than Patagonia sell their products at a wholesale level to dealers, sell through their own retail stores, through mail order, and through the internet, and do it all worldwide. This diversity of distribution has been a tremendous advantage for us. In a recession, when our wholesale sales are down, our direct sales channels do well because there is no lessened demand for our goods from our loyal customers. In the past, recessions have hurt our competitors and driven customers to us because people became less frivolous in their purchases. They didn't mind paying more for goods that won't go out of style and are of such quality that they will last a long time. Doing business in Japan, Europe, and Canada also buffers us against downturns in the economy in any one of those areas. When Japan's economy was on the rocks in the 1990s, Europe was doing okay. Each means of distribution requires its own expertise and often has demands that conflict with the other channels. The mail order business requires inventory depth for immediate fulfillment, an intimate knowledge of catalog merchandising, and close analysis of mailing list performance. Selling through the internet requires constant changing of the website. Retail requires well-organized merchandise displays and excellent management and training of floor staff. Traditional wholesale business operates mostly as a simple distribution business. You bring the merchandise into your warehouse and ship it out. I've had a great interest in Japanese society since 1964, when I passed through the country on my return from Korea. Much as the Japanese study the West and adopt Western culture and ideas to their advantage, so I have done with theirs. It's a very futuristic society in that the Japanese are always years ahead in how they have had to adapt and to cope with the modern world. Studying Japan gives me a look into the future of all societies that have to face overpopulation, illimited and shrinking resource base, and globalism. Practically every business book or business school teaches that for a foreign company to do business in Japan, it must seek a partnership or joint venture with a Japanese company. This is especially stressed with the system of distribution, which involves trading companies, banks and jobbers, and all sorts of relationships that no foreign company could hope to finesse on its own. I had been selling there even before 1975 with Chouinard equipment, but starting in 1981, Patagonia also tried to break into the Japanese market. We entered in the traditional way, using various trading companies and partnerships. We got nowhere. A trading company that dealt in general sporting goods like baseball bats and fishing gear could hardly be bothered with trying to sell pitons and carabiners. We tried a partnership with our early climbing packs, but that failed when they put my name and signature on a line of low-end day packs. Later on we used another distributor that had a similar line of clothing and was mainly interested in controlling our entry into the Japanese market so it wouldn't have to compete with us. Finally, in 1988, we decided to disregard all the books and go into the Japanese market in our own way. We knew that there was a demand for our clothing because of its quality and that our values were in tune with our Japanese customers. So we went in and started our wholly owned operation. It was going to be an American company doing business California style in Japan. We hired dirtbag Japanese climbers and kayakers. We hired Japanese women for management positions and didn't fire them when they got pregnant. We instituted the Let My People Go Surfing Flex Time policy. At the time IBM in Japan told us that we were the only American company in the country that was doing it on its own. What I found out was that Japan is the easiest country in the world to do business in, the laws are straightforward, the government is pro-business, the customs inspectors are intelligent and honest. The reason American companies have had trouble breaking into the Japanese market is that they are trying to do it by the book, and the quality of their products aren't up to Japanese standards. In a Japanese department store one time I watched a young fellow looking over some shirts. Once he decided he wanted a particular style and size, he went through the entire stack of mediums, looking at the stitching of each shirt until he found the one with the best quality. It was very important for him to walk out of the store knowing he had bought the best shirt in that stock. We have set the quality standards at Patagonia to meet our most demanding customer, the Japanese. If American car companies had realized that, they could be selling American cars in Japan, if they had also put the steering wheel to the right side. Why? See. Few businesses have the confidence to try to master all four business styles. But when you do master them, the four means of distribution work very powerfully in concert. We consider each to be essential to Patagonia's relationship with the customer. We have always been in the mail order business, even back in the late 1950s, when the mail was used simply to get pitons from my forge to friends during the winter months, when they couldn't buy directly from the back of my car in Yosemite, the Tetons, or the Canadian Rockies. There was low overhead, no middleman, and no promises that couldn't be kept. Often an order would come, and then the pitons would be forged. Fulfillment was 100%. The mail order catalog has always been our soapbox and enables us to transmit information about Patagonia's philosophies and products directly to people's homes and businesses anywhere in the world. Mail order actively works with our retail stores, dealers, and the international network to support company-wide efforts to develop and retain loyal Patagonia customers. My first principle of mail order argues that selling ourselves and our philosophy is equally important to selling product. Telling the Patagonia story and educating the Patagonia customer on layering systems, on environmental issues, and on the business itself are as much the catalog's mission as is selling the products. This has several practical implications, including how we measure the success of a catalog, how we format the information, and how we allocate space. Above its value as a sales tool, the catalog is first of all an image piece, presenting the company's values and obligations. Mail order as a means of selling enhances retail, internet, and wholesale, with all four acting synergistically to serve the customer. The catalog reaches people in their homes with an educational message just as the sales staff in Patagonia's own retail stores, or at dealers' stores, reaches customers firsthand. Sending a mail order customer a catalog implies that the product is immediately available. Mail order should fill the demand. Mail order customers quickly become impatient with out-of-stock situations, particularly early in the season, when they have just received the catalog. They see no reason why they can't have what they want, and they will turn to other companies that can deliver. Once they turn to other companies, it is difficult to regain their confidence. Patagonia's mail order inventory buy and in-season management are calculated to fulfill orders at 93 to 95% throughout the selling season. This rate has been determined to be ideal by LL Bean and other old-time mail order houses. To fulfill at a lower rate loses too many sales and customers. To attempt a higher rate leads to inefficient inventory control. In fact, you may have to double your inventory to achieve a 98% fulfillment rate. Mail orders mandate, and retails, for that matter, should be to achieve a 100% customer satisfaction rate. That is, give the customer what he wants 100% of the time. If a product is out of stock in mail order, the customer service rep takes advantage of the fact that we are a diversified company and pursues other channels to get the product to the customer. Retail managers and customer service reps can pursue one or all of these options. 1. Find the product in one of our retail stores, and have it shipped from there. 2. Find the item in retail, wholesale, or close-out inventory. 3. Locate the item in one of our dealers' shops, and let the dealer make the sale, thereby making two customers happy. The customer should have to make only one phone call. Just as the Patagonia production philosophy requires on-time product delivery from its suppliers, so Patagonia must deliver its products on time to its customers, and on time means when the customer wants it. Our model for customer service is the old-fashioned hardware store owner who knows his tools and what they're made for. His idea of service is to wait on a customer until the customer finds the right widget for the job, no matter how long it takes. At the other end of the spectrum is the employee who doesn't follow through, as the letter quoted below illustrates. It came from our manager in Japan in 1989 as an explanation of the lengths he had to go to in order to make up for bad customer service by one of his employees. A woman did request our catalog and paid 600 yen. $4 US, to us, but Patagonia Japan staff lost her address and phone number in messy desk and office. After 2 weeks, husband of woman made phone call and he was so angry like volcano. He entirely refused excuse of staff. He needed talk fight with Mr. Responsibility of Patagonia Japan. He said, "You guys lie, just take money and never send catalog. Hey, this is your way? I am working legally to stop your business with the public facility." I decided to take train to Tokyo from Yokohama to hand catalog and apologize directly to him. However, volcano angry customer additionally said, "Even if you come to me and my wife, I will never stop to kill your business." At his home, he needed my begging head on the floor. This is biggest humility of samurai. The customer was impressed with my behavior and he said, "Thank you for your delivery and your mind." There are not so many customer like this in Japan, but he is not special type of Japanese customer, he is pretty usual customer if problem happened. Katsumi Fujikura. Good customer service of course would have provided the woman her catalog when she asked for it. Even though mail order is the most scientific or formulaic of the Patagonia distribution channels, our first rule of mail order is to break the rules of mail order that don't apply to us. As a startup or ongoing business, mail order is the most predictable. Some of the classic mail order rules make as much sense for Patagonia as for any other mail order business, others do not. Some rules that other mail order businesses follow and Patagonia does not are: 1. Conduct a square-inch sales analysis of the catalog page. This is irrelevant and even damaging to our image. 2. Consult focus groups for direction. We ask ourselves. 3. Give more expensive items more space. Our socks sometimes get as much space as our guide jacket. 4. Write copy that appeals to vanity, greed, or guilt. Our copy pretty much sticks to facts and philosophy. Since the publication of the 1972 Chouinard equipment catalog that contained the clean climbing essay, we have seen that the primary purpose of our catalogs is to serve as a vehicle to communicate with our customers, whether it is by trying to change climbing philosophy, by rallying them to register and vote for the environment, as we did in 2004, or by just relating stories. Then, by the way, after we have achieved that purpose, we present the products they can buy. Over the years we have come upon a balance we find just about ideal: 55% product content and 45% devoted to message, essays, stories, and image photos. Whenever we have edged that content toward increased product presentation, we have actually experienced a decrease in sales. Being a confirmed Luddite all my life and an onazer of computers, I never could have imagined that the internet would become such an important part of our business. Yet it is the one place our customers are going to more and more to look for information about the company's brand, products, history, service, and image. Our internet business runs by the same values and philosophy as mail order. The difference is that it can react more quickly to the needs of the company and the customers. For instance, at the end of a season we can post our close-out sale items and be selling them on the same day. Or we can rally our customers to an environmental crisis. In 2003-04 our customers sent out 15,000 letters to the President of the United States, asking him to act on taking out the 4 dams on the Snake River that are key to restoring salmon to that river system. The website can be a very big tool to talk to many, or something that can be personalized when appropriate. For example, emails sent out from the website are sometimes based on how cold it is in different parts of the country, with different clothing system ideas for customers. The web is different in another way from mail order. It requires an individual to keep clicking and moving through the website. It is not like a catalog that can be flipped through passively. Our internet sales now exceed our mail order sales, and its success can be attributed to the synergy of Patagonia's being in the other 3 methods of distribution. Customers can view the quality of our products in a dealer's or our own stores, or see them in our catalog, and they can feel assured that what they order from their fuzzy little computer screen will be of the quality they expect. There are several historical reasons for Patagonia's entrance into the retail arena. The specialty outdoor market in the 60s and 70s still consisted mostly of hard goods, and the bulk of time and money was spent on advertising those goods. Those shop owners who chose to venture into clothing did so in a small way, cherry-picking the available lines. You hoped to catch a trend, not market a line and take a risk. No single Patagonia dealer carried more than 25% of the line. Merchandising was an unknown concept, and display was done on a sea of chrome racks. Nothing was folded, and our clothes were mixed in with other brands throughout the stores. In some cases, our underwear was thrown into big cardboard boxes on the floor. Buyers were also afraid to buy clothes or colors that deviated from the safe red or blue. The industry needed a change, and we didn't see anyone trying to establish order out of the chaos. In 1973 we owned a small retail store in Ventura, but we didn't know any more about display and merchandising than did the other stores, so we couldn't very well tout our ideas unless we could talk from experience. We needed a direct link with our customer, a place to try merchandising ideas and new products. At the time Berkeley was the hub of the outdoor industry, so we looked for a store location in the Bay Area. We figured what worked there would work for the country as a whole. In North Beach in San Francisco we found a building we loved, a garage built in 1924, with great natural lighting and a garden out back. Local friends tried to discourage us because the location had no dedicated parking and was off the beaten path for shopping. But we thought our customers would come to us, and rather than pay high rent in a well-trafficked location, we preferred to put the money into renovating this old garage and make it into a beautiful destination store. We designed our own racks and shelving. We displayed most of the clothes folded rather than hung and worked out our chromatic scheme to get the most pop from the color. We blew up image shots from the catalog and hung them on the walls. Philosophy of architecture. The philosophy of clothing design is really no different from that for other products, including buildings. The following are guidelines we use in creating a new retail store or office building that will optimize aesthetics, function, and responsibility. 1. Don't build a new building unless it's absolutely necessary. The most responsible thing to do is to buy used buildings, construction materials, and furniture. 2. Try to save old or historic buildings from being torn down. Any structural changes should honor the historical integrity of the building. We rectify misguided improvements made by previous tenants and strip away fake modern facades, ending up, we hope, with a building that is a gift to the neighborhood. 3. If you can't be retro, build quality. The aesthetic life expectancy of the building should be as long as the physical material's lifespan. 4. Use recycled, and recyclable, materials like steel girders, studs, remilled wood, and straw bales. Install fixtures from waste materials like pressed sunflower hulls and agricultural waste. 5. Anything that is built should be repairable and easily maintained. 6. Buildings should be constructed to last as long as possible, even if this initially involves a higher price. 7. Each store must be unique. The heroes, sports, history, and natural features of each area should be reflected and honored. After our success in San Francisco, we thought Seattle was a prime location for another store. The market was undersold to dealers who carried only a small depth of the line. The 19 dealers in the Seattle-Tacoma area in total were selling less Patagonia goods than was our one store in Ventura. There were plenty of users and a population base to support $2 million in sales. During the first 3 years after the Seattle store opened, in November 1987, wholesale sales to the area dealers increased an average of 21% annually. Obviously, we were not stealing business from our dealers because we were undersold in that area, and our being successful with our own retail store gave confidence to our dealers that they too could sell more Patagonia goods. After that, we decided to go international. I'd spent a lot of time climbing in the Alps in the 1960s, especially in the French Alps around Chamonix, camping in the mud in Snell's Field and drinking an occasional beer at the Bar National. Chamonix is the most cosmopolitan of the Alpine towns, with as many German, Italian, Scandinavian, British, and American climbers and skiers as French. I had fond memories of my time there and believed it was an ideal place to showcase the Patagonia line and create a direct relationship with a wide range of European customers. I wanted to create a local hangout, staffed with international hardcore skiers and climbers. I also wanted it to be a center for environmental activism, responsible for cleaning garbage off the glaciers and opposing the polluting truck traffic through the Montana Blank Tunnel. When Roger McDivitt went to Chamonix on vacation in 1986, Melinda, who was now running the retail sector of Patagonia, asked him to look around for a building to rent. A week later, an excited Roger called to say he had found the perfect space. He'd even signed a lease. When the photos arrived via express mail, Melinda, who had run the San Francisco remodeling project, sat down and cried. Then she blew up the photos on the copy machine and traced the horrible 1950s Euro-modern facade. She stripped away the orange louver trim to bare the structure and then superimposed some of the classic trim shapes from photos of neighboring, older Chamonix buildings. Eventually we had a store all Chamonix could be proud of. Melinda, a zealot, insists that any building we occupy must honor its surrounding history and culture and must be prepared to last another 100 years. The main benefit of a wholesale operation is that it requires a much smaller investment to reach customers than mail order or our own retail stores. Wholesale reaches potential customers where they live, travel, and shop for their hard goods, and it places the labor and expense of selling to the customer on the dealer's shoulders. The dealer has control over the relationship with the customer, and the dealer then becomes the voice of Patagonia. So how do we ensure that the real Patagonia story isn't lost in translation? The way to get our message across is to develop a partnership with our dealers. The partnership we seek with dealers is similar to that which our product development and production staffs seek with vendors and contractors. The only difference is that in this case Patagonia Wholesale is the supplier. Why should we want to put in the effort to develop these partnerships with dealers when it requires much more time, energy, and fortitude than does the traditional semi-annual buffalo hunt for new dealers, where it seems far easier just to open 100 or 200 new dealers every year and just get rid of the ones that don't work out? There are key benefits to having a working partnership with a few good dealers. 1. We don't have to expend the effort, time, and money to seek out new dealers. 2. We limit our credit risks. 3. We minimize the legal problems associated with cutting off a dealer whose bad service is a reflection on us. 4. We develop loyal buyers who make a commitment to the line and either carry a broad representation of the line or, in the case of a small specialty shop, in-depth inventory. 5. We maintain better control over our product and image. 6. We receive better information about the market and our products. Our dealers also have advantages in this kind of relationship. They are: 1. A product line that sells year after year. 2. Protection from market saturation. 3. A stable pricing structure. 4. Expertise from us in buying, merchandising, and displaying our products. 5. Being part of Patagonia's synergistic marketing and distribution program. In its earliest days, Patagonia had no trouble focusing. We knew whom to sell to: any store in the country that sold Chouinard equipment for alpinists, which in 1974 established 2 qualifications for dealership: minimum sales of $1,000 per year and a floor staff that included at least 1 climber. We knew what to sell. The original line consisted of the rugby shirt, sailor shirt, stand-up shorts, and the Chamonix guide sweater. And we had a simple, shared strategy with our dealers: sell as much as possible. The dealer in turn had to consider Patagonia a genuine partner, and this involves more than trust and goodwill. As a rule in the United States we work to have eventually 20 to 25% of a dealer's business and or be its first or second largest clothing vendor. This establishes a de facto partnership. Even a dealer with a strong ego who did it my way will listen to someone who supplies 20 to 25% of what she sells. Usually a prospective dealer will want to know why and how establishing a mutual strategy with us will benefit his business. He will want to know how it will improve sales, attract new customers, and increase the loyalty of existing ones. It should be noted here that a dealer that is a partner has to be a full and contributing partner. There is no such thing as a canned or turnkey Patagonia merchandising program. Such a program loses its life and momentum the minute the rep walks out the door. We work most successfully with a dealer who invests time, energy, and thought into tailoring a Patagonia program to her store or customers and who welcomes our continuing participation and makes use of our expertise. In 1985 I gave a speech about the gloomy state of the specialty outdoor industry. Let's look at what's been happening to retail in general in America and how it's changing. Take groceries as an example. It used to be that to put dinner on the table, you had to visit a bakery, a butcher or fishmonger, a general grocer, and a greengrocer for vegetables and fruits. Then along came the supermarket where, under one roof, you could buy bread, meat, vegetables, milk, and whatever. The supermarket was great for Middle America in the 50s to the 70s, when people were satisfied with white bread, fish sticks, and hamburger. But times are changing. Now people have shopping lists that read like an international food fair. Take my own the other day: wasabi, fresh albacore, basmati rice, shea oats, and kimchi. I know of a store being built in Marin County that will be a full-on organic supermarket with no product in the store with dangerous or chemical additives. No hormones in the meat, no preservatives in the bread, and a full-time chemist in a lab in-house to check on the produce. There will be a bakery with all whole grain goods and a deli with all sorts of prepared foods to take out like Zabar's or Dean and DeLuca in New York. These people know what your average Marin County customer's needs are, and they plan to service him. For the average eclectic customer living in a not-so-futuristic place as California, shopping for good food has gotten back to going to the fish market, the health food store, the bakery, and the butchers for non-prepackaged meat and no-hormone chicken. So how does this compare with the evolution of retail in the outdoor industry? The first specialty outdoor shops were hardware stores specializing in climbing gear like Jerry's and Hollow Bar. For ski gear there was the Ski Hut in Berkeley, and of course for sailing there were chandleries selling varnish and nuts and bolts. And then came the backpacking boom of the 60s and 70s. You could get everything you needed to climb or backpack from one of 300 backpacking shops in the U.S. Backpacking and climbing peaked as sports in 1972 to 73, and business in the hardware, meaning sleeping bags, tents, ropes, etc., started declining. At about this time Chouinard, Patagonia was one of the companies responsible for talking dealers into going soft, that is, putting their dollars into lifestyle clothing. So now in the 80s we have a situation a bit like the Middle American supermarket. Under one roof of your typical outdoor shop you can buy some rugged outdoor clothes, some kayaking and climbing gear, and high-quality sleeping bags, but it's a bit like the white bread and fish sticks syndrome. You won't find an 80-degree dihedral slalom kayak paddle or overboots for expedition or winter climbing. They can special order it, but it will take 6 to 8 weeks. Climbing gear? Oh, it's nailed onto the wall behind the sleeping bags. They do have a $500 tent that's similar to a Eureka knockoff you can buy at the fishing and hunting store for $200. And if you want a certain piece of Patagonia clothing, there's probably a 10% chance it will be in stock. You see what's happened? By carrying a little bit of this and a little of that, these stores have evolved into non-specialty stores. That would be okay if your average outdoor store customer had average tastes and average mentality. But we are talking about smart people with money and not much free time. If there is one common trait to all outdoor people, it's the fact that they do not spend their free time aimlessly shopping. If he or she is going to drive for 20 minutes to a store, it's to buy certain needed items. It's not to be entertained like the Bloomingdale's customer. And I can tell you these people are going to be pretty angry if the store doesn't have what they want. In most cases the consumer has far outgrown the capabilities of the average outdoor store to service him. He is being forced into buying through mail order. Or he will shop at Ray's and other bigger stores that offer a larger selection. Even the more progressive department stores are doing a better job of merchandising and selling lifestyle clothes like rugby shirts and down jackets. The little specialty shop doesn't have enough space or inventory to be a clothing store and often no longer has the expertise to be a good climbing or backpacking store. By and large we have a no-growth industry with some larger and more progressive shops doing well, but the majority of the shops are not going anywhere. What happened since I gave that talk 20 years ago paints an even gloomier picture for the majority of small retailers. The generation of climbers and skiers and fly fishermen who started these specialty stores in the 60s and 70s are burned out and either have retired or are ready to. Their kids don't want to take over, and since the industry is no longer in a growth mode, there are no buyers in sight. The Rays, Sport Marts, and Decathlons, in France, are taking even bigger chunks of the business. With mainstream companies like Ralph Lauren, Tommy Hilfiger, and Nike all making Gore-Tex shells and down jackets, you really can outfit yourself for Everest in Macy's department store, and with a black and yellow one-piece snowmobile suit from Costco you will be better equipped than Edmund Hillary was in 1953. Since Patagonia has no desire to sell to department stores or to the giant sporting goods chains, our dealer list has gone down 40% since 1985. It's not a healthy situation for the specialty outdoor industry, Yet the problems and the solutions are no different for all small retail stores worldwide that are facing competition from the Walmartization of retail. There's a wine shop in Portland, Oregon, called 750 milliliters that is a good example of how one shop competes with the big liquor and wine stores. Since it is a small store, the owner has personally chosen every bottle of wine. A customer like me who likes an earthy flavor in red wines but is too cheap to go for a great French Bordeaux can explain to a knowledgeable salesperson what he's looking for and be guided to just the right bottle and be told how long he has to cellar the wine to optimize that barnyard flavor he's looking for. One of my favorite fly shops and Patagonia dealers is Blue Ribbon Flies in West Yellowstone, Montana, a small town with 4 other full-service fly shops. Blue Ribbon is a small shop with not a big choice of rods and reels and gear, just enough so there is everything you need to fish the Yellowstone waters. All its flies are made in the United States by 30 of the best fly tamers in the country. During the fishing season there are 2 tiers on the floor who will custom tie any fly you want. A fly shop that doesn't carry fly tying materials is not a fly shop as far as I'm concerned. This shop not only has a great selection but collects and dyes a lot of the hair and feathers itself. It will even offer to dye a customer's pheasant skin purple if that's asked for. It donates 2% of its net sales to conservation causes around Yellowstone Park, and it gets mail order customers from across the country who will buy a $700 rod from them because they know that $14 of that purchase will help create better fishing for them the next time they visit the area. Blue Ribbon's business has tripled over the last 7 years. There's no secret to running a great retail store. It just requires hard work and great customer service. Image philosophy. Even if he or she isn't aware of it, every individual spends an entire lifetime creating and evolving a personal image that others perceive. A company too creates and evolves an image that can stem from its reason to be in business, can grow out of its actions, or perhaps is assembled from pieces by the creative mind of an advertising person. A company's, and a person's, image can be very different from their self-image. Patagonia's image arises directly from the values, outdoor pursuits, and passions of its founders and employees. While it has practical and nameable aspects, it can't be made into a formula. In fact, because so much of the image relies on authenticity, a formula would destroy it. Ironically, part of Patagonia's authenticity lies in not being concerned about having an image in the first place. Without a formula, the only way to sustain an image is to live up to it. Our image is a direct reflection of who we are and what we believe. What's at the heart of the Patagonia image? How are we perceived by the public? Foremost, certainly, is our origin as a blacksmith shop that made the best climbing hardware in the world. The beliefs, attitudes, and values of those free-thinking, independent climbers and surfers who worked there became the basis for Patagonia's culture, and from that culture evolved an image, authentic, hardcore, quality products made by the same people who used them. Our image has evolved to include the culture of a new generation of climbers, kayakers, fishermen, and surfers who make the best outdoor clothing in the world. At the heart is their commitment to wildness, both in the natural world and in the sports they serve. They continue to hold to certain values and beliefs that were inherent in the fledgling company of the 1950s but have brought with them a willingness to take strong stands on environmental issues. The fact that we make clothing for a multitude of outdoor uses has been a great advantage to us. We have a greater expanded future than if we made clothing for just one market, like our original line for mountain climbing. But we also have recognized that we should not attempt to do it all under one brand. The Watergirl USA line of women's water sports-inspired clothing was not brought bearing the Patagonia label because it was too much of a stretch to imagine a product like Patagonia bikinis. It would be like LL Beans coming out with snowboards, it wouldn't work. Watergirl kept all the values of its parent company, Patagonia, but was given its own name and allowed to develop its own style, identity, and image. It is also run by active women who make what they want to wear themselves. Patagonia's image is a human voice. It expresses the joy of people who love the world, who are passionate about their beliefs, and who want to influence the future. It is not processed, it won't compromise its humanity. This means that it will offend, and it will inspire. It's important to control our image, not only through the actions we take, the products we sell, and living up to our past, but by how we are perceived through the normal business channels of marketing and selling our products. I've divided this aspect into 4 areas. Many companies communicate with their customers primarily through advertising. This grabs your attention but can't hold it. A quick glance, and you're back to the article you were reading or the show you were watching or on to someone else's ad or the mute button. It is said that a TV viewer has to be hit on the head with the same ad 7 or 8 times before it begins to register. Just as Patagonia makes products for a deeper, less distracted experience of the world and its wild places, our image has to convey refuge from, and offer an alternative to, a virtual world of fast-moving, mind-skimming, and numbing pictures and sound. In order to tell our whole story, we need the customer's undivided attention. That can be done these days through a website or a catalog. We have both, and there is an art and a science to each. A website allows the mouse-armed customer to explore more quickly and easily his areas of strong interest. A catalog has the advantage of self-containment and mobility, of not confining the customer's experience of Patagonia to a computer, of providing surprises as the customer turns the page. The first goal of the catalog is to share and encourage a particular philosophy of life, of what undergirds the image. The basic tenets of that philosophy are, a deep appreciation for the environment and a strong motivation to help solve the environmental crisis, a passionate love for the natural world, a healthy skepticism toward authority, a love for difficult, human-powered sports that require practice and mastery, a disdain for motorized sports like snowmobiling or jet skiing, a bias for wacko, often self-deprecating humor, a respect for real adventure, defined best as a journey from which you may not come back alive, and certainly not as the same person, a taste for real adventure, and a belief that less is more, in design and in consumption. The catalog is our Bible for each selling season. Every other medium we use to tell our story, from the website, to hang tags, to retail displays, to press releases to videos, builds from the catalog's base and from its pictorial and editorial standards. Looking back at the early Patagonia catalogs, I find it really embarrassing to see how corny the photos look. The clothes were shown on people, and since we couldn't afford real models or professional photographers, we used our friends, put them in stupid poses, and snapped a photo. Pretty bad, but that's what everyone else's catalog or advertising looked like in those days. One day while I was out surfing with my friend Rick Ridgway, an idea popped into my head. I told him that I was going to start photographing the clothes without the people in them, and we were going to collect photos from our customers of real people doing real things. We put a notice in our catalog for our customers to capture a Patagoniac. We were inundated with photo submissions from our customers and photographers, and we had to create a photo department with Rick's wife, Jennifer, as manager and editor. The clean climbing essay in the 1972 Chouinard equipment catalog not only encouraged climbers to climb clean but also was the first piece ever written about how to use the new chocks. As a result, Chouinard Equipment's piton business dried up, and its chalk business exploded, nearly overnight. To show its impact, far beyond a business tool, that catalog was reviewed as a mountaineering book in the American Alpine Journal. A 1991 introductory essay, Reality Check, reminded customers that every product we make causes environmental harm and encouraged people to buy better and to buy less. Patagonia catalogs have printed field reports, brief essays about experiences in the wild, by writers and friends like Paul Theroux, Tom Brokaw, Gretel Ehrlich, Rick Ridgway, and Terry Tempest Williams. We have commissioned and printed environmental essays by, among others, Bill McKibben, Vandana Shiva, Sue Halpern, Carl Safina, and Jared Diamond. Even our regular product copywriters have impressive credentials. Ellen Meloy was a finalist in 2003 for a Pulitzer Prize for her nonfiction book The Anthropology of Turquoise. Some stories are easier to tell, more readily apparent or immediate than others. If you were to tell a parent that the local drinking water is unsafe for their children, you'd spark immediate outrage. But tell the same person that cancer clusters show up inexplicably in long-term studies of children who live in their pesticide-intensive farming community, and the response is less pronounced. That story is emotionally less immediate, and it requires more effort and depth in the telling. Product copy provides the necessary facts about fabric detail and usage and also supports some of the subtler points made in the photographs about what we wish for in sports and in life. Our accuracy standards are very high. Since we don't mind taking a stand or risk giving offense, there's all the more reason to get the facts right. As for style, we write as though we were the customers. In fact, since we are still some of our own best customers, this is not too difficult. We don't speak to what is perceived as the lowest common denominator. We speak to each customer as we want to be treated, as an engaged, intelligent, trusted individual. We have 3 general guidelines for all promotional efforts by Patagonia, both within and beyond the pages of the catalog. 1. Our charter is to inspire and educate rather than promote. 2. We would rather earn credibility than buy it. The best resources for us are the word-of-mouth recommendation from a friend or favorable comments in the press. 3. We advertise only as a last resort. Ideally, every great product would sell itself. Some products do just that. We've sold our polo shirts for 20 years, and we've never advertised them. Nor do we give them much space in the catalog, except to show off the variety of new colors. I wish all our products could stand on their own like polo shirts or baggies. We make certain assumptions about our customers, not just that they are intelligent. We assume that they don't shop as entertainment, that they're not out to buy a life, that they want to deepen and simplify, not junk up, their lives, and that they are fed up with or indifferent to being targets for aggressive advertising. We know that for customers as well as for ourselves, the most valued advice we can receive is that from a trusted friend. After that, we respect the opinions of pros or experts like outdoor instructors, climbing guides, fishing guides, or river outfitters. The pros live and work in their clothing every day. For this reason, we have always offered a pro-purchase program selling clothes at a discount to key people in various technical markets. We work with a variety of groups, from ski patrols at challenging areas like Jackson Hole and Telluride, to river guides in the Grand Canyon, to climbers off to attempt the Trango Towers in Pakistan, to groups working on environmental issues, people working to reintroduce wolves to Yellowstone or Greenpeace activists. We also provide gear, and sometimes stipends, to top climbers, surfers, and endurance athletes to wear our clothes, in order to give us feedback and help with design issues. They advise our retail staff on how to sell our technical sports-specific products, attend sales meetings, and generally serve as ambassadors for the company. This reflects well on Patagonia at trade shows or consumer events and helps create trickle-down word of mouth. We do draw lines with this policy. They aren't paid, for instance, according to the number of cover shots they get wearing clothes with our logo. Sponsorship of famous athletes is a good promotional tool for selling to kids who dream someday of being able to surf like Kelly Slater or climb like Chris Sharma, but I think sponsorship hurts soul sports like surfing or climbing. As I wrote in an article for Climbing magazine, sponsorship by the outdoor industry is a no-win situation for the climber in the long run. Being paid to climb forces one to compromise one's values. It encourages the alpine climber to seek routes that make good press, and it can force an otherwise wonderfully eccentric sport climber to act out a role in order to become more sellable in the media. I also think sponsorship hurts companies in the long run by tying the company image to an ephemeral career or to a single person who often has nothing to do with your product or service. What does Hertz think of its years with O.J. Simpson these days? On the other hand, the more independent the outsider who praises your company or products, the greater the credibility. Talking about ourselves to our parents on the phone is fine, but in every other situation the word from outside carries more weight. Editorial coverage is also important. Public relations companies tell you that a favorable, independent press notice is worth 3 to 8 times the same space paid for with an advertisement. Using a more conservative 1-to-1 formula, we calculated that in 1994, the year we came out with Singchilla fleece made from recycled soda bottles, we generated $5 million worth of free press for the company. Our approach to public relations is aggressive. If we have a news angle, we play it. We work hard to bring our stories to reporters, whether about new products, our stance on environmental issues, or our child care program. But we don't produce glossy PR kits or throw elaborate press parties at trade shows. We believe the best way to get press is to have something to say. Advertising, as I mentioned, rates dead last as a credible source of information. What works best for us are paid announcements for a new store opening or to create environmental awareness of a specific issue, for example, the reasons to demolish a dam on a particular river. We do occasionally use advertising to support the brand, usually in small circulation sports specialty magazines. Overall, we do far less advertising, usually less than 1% of sales, than most outdoor companies, let alone clothing companies. In advertising, the impression has to be quick and timely, but all our usual standards for photography and copy apply. The photo in the Patagonia ad is often the best in the magazine. Financial philosophy. Who are businesses really responsible to? Their customers? Shareholders? Employees? We would argue that it's none of the above. Fundamentally, businesses are responsible to their resource base. Without a healthy environment, there are no shareholders, no employees, no customers, and no business. From a series of ads we did in 2004. We are a product-driven company. That means the product comes first and the company exists to create and support our products. This is different from a distribution company whose product may not be the primary concern but rather service. When you look closely at some companies, it may be a surprise to find that not all of them are in business to produce a tangible product or service. The real product may be the company itself, which is just being grown to be sold one day. In a public corporation, the product may be the stock, because all decisions made by the CEO and other internal stockholders, or by holders of options on stock and the board of directors, also stockholders, are made not for the long-term health of the corporation but to keep the stock price up until the principals can cash out. This can lead to cooking the books, which is often the only way to show profits or growth every quarter, and it leads to confusion in the company about why it's in business. Our mission statement says nothing about making a profit. In fact, Melinda and I consider our bottom line to be the amount of good that the business has accomplished over the year. However, a company needs to be profitable in order to stay in business and to accomplish all its other goals, and we do consider profit to be a vote of confidence, that our customers approve of what we are doing. The third part of our mission statement, using business to implement and inspire solutions to the environmental crisis, puts the responsibility of leadership directly on us. If we wish to lead corporate America by example, we have to be profitable. No company will respect us, no matter how much money we give away or how much publicity we receive for being one of the 100 best companies, if we are not profitable. It's okay to be eccentric, as long as you are rich, otherwise you're just crazy. At Patagonia, making a profit is not the goal because the Zen master would say profits happen when you do everything else right. In our company, finance consists of much more than the management of money. It is primarily the art of leadership through the balancing of traditional financing approaches in a business that is anything but traditional. In many companies, the tail, finance, wags the dog, corporate decisions. We strive to balance the funding of environmental activities with the desire to continue in business for the next 100 years. Our philosophy does not hold that finance is the root of all business. Rather, it complements all other segments of the company. We recognize that our profits are directly tied to the quality of our work and our product. A company that doesn't take quality seriously will attempt to maximize profits by cost-cutting, increasing sales by creating an artificial demand for the goods, and hammering the rank and file to work harder. In direct sales distribution, you do not necessarily make more money by cramming more product into your catalog pages or onto your retail sales floor. A quality presentation will always outsell messiness. We recognize that we make the most profit by selling to our loyal customers. A loyal customer will buy new products with little sales effort and will tell all his friends. A sale to a loyal customer is worth 6 to 8 times more to our bottom line than a sale to another customer. We believe that quality is no longer a luxury. It is sought out by the consumer, and it is expected. For example, the Strategic Planning Institute has been collecting data for years on the performance of thousands of companies. It publishes a yearly report, titled PIMS, Profit Impact of Market Strategy. That report has begun to show quite clearly that quality, not price, has the highest correlation with business success. In fact, the Institute has found that overall, companies with high product and service quality reputations have on average return on investment rates 12 times higher than their lower quality and lower priced competitors. Environmental concerns also influence our financial decisions. In the mid-90s, we decided to change the packaging of our thermal underwear. We were using a thick, wraparound cardboard header inside a heavy Ziploc plastic bag. To get away from this packaging for the heavier weight expedition underwear, we decided to go without any packaging at all and hang them up like regular clothing. As for the underwear made of lighter weight material, we just rolled them up and put a rubber band around them. We were warned to be prepared for a 30% cut in sales because we were competing with companies that were extremely competitive with their packaging. One competitor, for example, put its product out in adorable sealed tin cans. We did it anyway because it was the right thing to do. The first year this practice kept 12 tons of material from being shipped around the world and eventually being discarded and dumped into landfills, and it saved the company $150,000 in unnecessary packaging. It also brought us a 25% increase in thermal underwear sales. Since they weren't hidden away in a package and had to be displayed like the regular clothing, people could feel the material and appreciate the quality. And since they were displayed like the other clothes, we were forced to make our underwear look like regular clothing, to the point that now most Kaplan underwear tops can be worn as a regular shirt, fulfilling our goal of making clothes that are multifunctional. Returns and bad quality in manufacturing cost millions of dollars each year. We know that in 1988 each return cost us an average of $26 to process, and that number has only gone up. But what is the cost of a dissatisfied customer? Recently, a worldwide survey of customers found that only 14% of Americans were likely to contact a company about a problem. In Europe, the number was less than 8%, and in Japan only 4%. Correspondingly, other studies show that 1/2 to 1/3 of customers who have had problems will never purchase from that company again. We are a privately owned company, and we have no desire to sell the company or to sell stock to outside investors, and we don't want to be financially leveraged. In addition, we have no desires to expand Patagonia beyond the specialty outdoor market. So how does finance react to these very clear-cut dictates? First of all, by growing only at a natural rate. When our customers tell us they are frustrated by not being able to buy our products because of constant out-of-stock situations, then we need to make more, and that leads to natural growth. We do not create artificial demand for our goods by advertising in Vanity Fair or GQ or on buses in inner cities, hoping to get kids to buy their black down jackets from us instead of the North Face or Timberland. We want customers who need our clothing, not just desire it. We don't want to be a big company. We want to be the best company, and it's easier to try to be the best small company than the best big company. We have to practice self-control. Growth in one part of the company may have to be sacrificed to allow growth in another. It's also important that we have a clear idea of what the limits are to this experiment and live within those limits, knowing that the sooner we expand outside them, the sooner the type of company we want will die. Slow growth or no growth means the profits have to come from our being more efficient every year. Unlike the government, we cannot rely on an expanding economy to burn the fat away. It's easier for a company to make a profit when it's growing at 10% or 20% a year. We have been profitable in years when we grew only a few percent by increasing the quality of our product, maximizing the efficiency of our operations, and living within our means. Because of our pessimism about the future of the world economy based on limited resources and on endlessly consuming and discarding goods we often don't need, not only don't we want to be financially leveraged, but our goal is to have no debt. A company with little debt or with cash in the kitty can take advantage of opportunities as they come up or invest in a startup without having to go further in debt or find outside investors. In an age when change happens so quickly, any strategic plan must be updated at least every year. Many Japanese companies don't do yearly budgets, they do a new budget every 6 months. In our case, an inflexible plan would be centralized planning at its worst. It builds in a certain rigidity, a certain bureaucracy, that is oblivious of changing realities. A budget can be a valuable guideline and planning tool, or it can be a bludgeon. We have to look ahead in other ways as well. It's the role of financial people not only to tell you what happened but also to prevent rude surprises in the future. A company should always be playing what-if scenarios, that is, what if all our top management goes down in an airplane crash, our warehouse burns down, our main computer melts down or gets a virus? Or what if there is a 25% downturn in business or sales in Japan suddenly explode beyond our wildest planning? We don't need operational plans already set up to deal with these crises. But we do need to identify which one could strike so we are less likely to take a hit in the back of the head. That same desire for transparency extends to our dealings with the government. We don't play games with the taxman or auditor. Our tax strategy is to pay our fair share but not a penny more. We don't, with clever advice, develop complex schemes to do an end run around our taxes. The same holds true for our accounting procedures. We know of legal ways to change how we account for our money, in inventory or expenses, for example, that would result in dramatically different reported earnings from one year to the next. In fact, we could, within accepted and legal accounting practices, like so many public companies, show a profit every quarter. But our accounting strategy is to use only those techniques that, in the view of our CFO, provide the most accurate and consistent reflection of our true financial position. We get approached by prospective buyers almost weekly, and their intent is always the same. They see an undervalued company that they can rapidly grow and take public. Being a publicly held corporation or even a partnership would put shackles on how we operate, restrict what we do with our profits, and put us on a growth, suicide track. Our intent is to remain a closely held private company, so we can continue to focus on our bottom line, doing good. Human Resource Philosophy. A master in the art of living draws no sharp distinction between his work and his play, his labor and his leisure, his mind and his body, his education and his recreation. He hardly knows which is which. He simply pursues his vision of excellence through whatever he is doing, and leaves others to determine whether he is working or playing. To himself, he always appears to be doing both. François Auguste René Chateaubriand. Patagonia's working culture can be traced to the origins of Chouinard equipment. Ours was a small company designing and making the world's best climbing equipment for its employees and their friends. The owners and employees were climbers, none considered themselves business people. Working satisfied the creative urge to do something both useful and pleasurable, to make beautiful, functional climbing tools that the employees needed to pursue their own climbing. Work also satisfied the need to make money. We had no dividing line between those who used the products and those who made them. The interest of the customer was equal to that of the employee. Climbers had a vested interest in making climbing gear. Patagonia's first clothes, rugby shirts, stand-up shorts, were made to climb in, and the employee attitude toward soft goods was no different from that toward the products made of iron. Patagonia is of course a larger and much more complex company than Chouinard Equipment ever was. Most of the people who now sew Patagonia clothes will never wear them. It's our first principle of hiring, however, that as many Patagonia employees as possible also be true Patagonia customers. We like to use the clothes we design, have made, and sell, so we have a direct relationship to the product of our work. We don't try to think like a customer, but as customers we get upset when a product doesn't meet our expectations, and we are proud when it does. I cannot imagine any company that wants to make the best product of its kind being staffed by people who do not care passionately about the product. If Patagonia had begun primarily as a marketing idea or investment opportunity, the company would be a very different place to work. It would be understood that the primary purpose of the company would be the generation of wealth for its owners and investors. Working here might be much less an end in itself, more just a step in a career path. Other values too can be traced to the origins of Chouinard Equipment. Most climbers of the 1960s and early 1970s, although middle class and white, were alienated from the mainstream suburban culture. They valued their climbing time and their relationship to the rocks and the mountains, and they preferred taking physical risks to trying to get ahead in the larger world. Many earned subsistence incomes on purpose, and they worked as little as they could. Corporate life did not appeal, it was regarded as inauthentic, illegitimate, and toxic. Patagonia employees have diverse political, social, and religious beliefs. That's as it should be. And not everyone wants to change the world, but we want the company to feel like home for those who do. Employees who were drawn to Chouinard Equipment, and later to Patagonia, either shared those values or did not mind working among those who held them. Though their world has changed mightily since the 1960s, their residue remains here, chiefly in the commitment of so many employees to environmentalism, but also in our aversion to unnecessary hierarchy, unconscious material consumption, and a passive approach to life. The gatekeeper may be the most important person in the company. Doug Tompkins. If you care about having a company where employees treat work as play and regard themselves as ultimate customers for the products they produce, then you have to be careful whom you hire, treat them right, and train them to treat other people right. Otherwise you may come to work one day and find it isn't a place you want to be anymore. Patagonia doesn't usually advertise in the Wall Street Journal, attend job fairs, or hire corporate headhunters to find new employees. We prefer instead to seek out people through an informal network of friends, colleagues, and business associates. We don't want someone who can just do a job, we want the best person for the job. Yet we don't look for stars seeking special treatment and perks. Our best efforts are collaborative, and the Patagonia culture rewards the ensemble player while it barely tolerates those who need the limelight. We also seek, as I mentioned above, core Patagonia product users, people who love to spend as much time as possible in the mountains or the wild. We are, after all, an outdoor company. We would not staff our trade show booth with a bunch of out-of-shape guys wearing white shirts, ties, and suspenders any more than a doctor would let his receptionist smoke in the office. We can hardly continue to make the best outdoor clothing if we become primarily an indoor culture. So we seek out dirtbags who feel more at home in a base camp or on the river than they do in the office. All the better if they have excellent qualifications for whatever job we hire them for. But we'll often take a risk on an itinerant rock climber that we wouldn't on a run-of-the-mill MBA. Finding a dyed-in-the-wool business person to take up climbing or river running is a lot more difficult than teaching a person with a ready passion for the outdoors how to do a job. Of course, we do hire some people strictly for their technical expertise. We have employees who never sleep outside or who have never peed in the woods. What they all do share, as our organizational development consultant noted, is a passion for something outside themselves, whether for surfing or opera, climbing or gardening, skiing or community activism. We've filled the choir with outdoor store clerks, lots of those, environmental activists, independent designers, whitewater rodeo artists, journalists, car wash jockeys, fishing junkies, script writers, painters, high school teachers, a municipal judge and several recovering lawyers, gospel singers, cabinet makers, ski instructors, climbing guides, bagpipe players, airline pilots, forest rangers, computer nerds, a sprinkling of seasoned garmendos, and a few MBAs. As the list shows, we value diversity of all kinds. Well over 50% of all jobs are held by women. Hiring people with diverse backgrounds brings in a flexibility of thought and openness to new ways of doing things, as opposed to hiring clones from business schools who have been taught a codified way of doing business. A business that thrives on being different requires different types of people. We hire slowly. We can afford to since we get an average of 900 applicants for each job opening. We make prospective candidates interview with their potential colleagues as well as their bosses. It is not uncommon for a management candidate to be interviewed by several groups of 4 to 6 people at a time or to return 2 or 3 times over several weeks. As much as possible, we hire from within, to keep the company culture strong. And then we train, and take the time to train, as though our future depended on it. These practices often demand extra effort in the short term, leaving a position unfilled while you scour for the right person, taking the extra time to train a river rat to do her new PR job, working with someone who may not share your language. In the long run, the extra effort pays off, if you want to have an interesting, colorful, unpredictable place to spend your working hours. This all sounds great, but the reality is that, like most companies, we have to go outside the company to fill many top-level positions, including CEO. For some reason, we are still not doing a good enough job of training and mentoring our own people to grow into the ever more technical and sophisticated needs of a growing company. Maybe it's because we are still learning how to run a business ourselves. Remember, work has to be fun. We value employees who live rich and rounded lives. We run a flexible workplace, and we have ever since we were a blacksmith shop that shut down whenever the waves were 6 feet, hot, and glassy. Our policy has always allowed employees to work flexible hours, as long as the work gets done with no negative impacts on others. A serious surfer doesn't plan to go surfing next Tuesday at 2 o'clock. You go surfing when there are waves and the tide and wind are right. And you go ski powder when there's powder snow. And you better be Johnny at the rat hole if you don't want to become a loser. This has led to our Let My People Go Surfing flex time policy. Employees take advantage of this policy to catch a good swell, or go bouldering for an afternoon, pursue an education, or get home in time to greet the kids when they climb down from the school bus. This flexibility allows us to keep valuable employees who love their freedom and sports too much to settle for the constraints of a more regimented work environment. Our benefits package is generous but strategic. Each benefit makes good business sense for us. We offer comprehensive health insurance, even to part-time employees, in order to attract serious athletes to work in our retail stores. We provide on-site childcare in Ventura, because we know parents are more productive if they're not worrying about the safety and well-being of their children. When it opened in 1984, our Great Pacific Child Development Center was one of only 150 on-site corporate child care centers in the country. It includes an infant care room for children as young as 8 weeks and rooms progressively for toddlers to kindergarteners. The Kids Club, for school-age children, picks up children at the end of the school day and brings them back to the GPCDC, saving their parents from having to make the drive and from worrying about after-school care. The staff-to-child ratio in all parts of the child care center exceeds what is required by the state, and the caregivers are highly trained. The center has made a significant difference in the lives of the working parents in Ventura and their children. It has an intimate bond with the company as well. Children's laughter and chatter are among the regular sounds of our business, from the playground outside, individual children visiting at their parents' desks, or full classes traipsing through the buildings on Halloween. A mother nursing her child during a meeting, commonplace in Ventura, is a regular reminder that the career versus child choices so many of us make in fact need not be choices. The child care operations continue to gain national attention, and the caregivers who run the center are often asked to help other businesses set up safe and nurturing on-site child care facilities. What do the kids think? I walked into our child care building one day and asked some of the 4- and 5-year-olds, "Hi, kids. How's school?" One young guy immediately corrected me. "We're not in school, we're at work. My mother works over there, and I work here." What a difference that is from your average kid whose father or mother disappears every day for 8 hours or more and who thus grows up with no concept of work. It's no wonder every young kid dreams of being sponsored by a big corporation like Oakley or Nike, as if this were what work is all about. At Patagonia, our child care facility is producing one of our best products, Excellent Kids. The babies are constantly being held and handled by lots of caregivers. They are being raised by the whole village, with lots of stimulation and learning experiences. As a result, when a stranger says hello to them, they don't run and hide behind their mother's skirts. We encourage the kids to climb and fall and scrape themselves. When they're ready for kindergarten, their new teachers often comment that they are the most confident and polite kids in class. We used to let the kids go barefoot all the time, until we started getting complaints from their teachers that the kids refused to wear shoes to class. There are about 300 employees in Ventura and 100 children in the Child Development Center. We charge the parents rates that are lower than comparable child care centers, because we fund it with another $600,000 in subsidies. What appears to be a financial burden is in fact a profit center. 71% of our employees are women, and many occupy high-level management positions. Studies have shown that it costs a company an average of $50,000 to replace an employee, from recruiting costs, training, and loss of productivity. Our child care center helps us retain our skilled moms. One cautionary note we learned: if you're going to have a child care center, you also need to give at least 60 days paid paternity leave. We do. Otherwise, many young parents still unclear on the concept of parenthood would rather dump the baby in the nursery as soon as possible and go back to work to pay for that new car or whatever. Those first few months are extremely important for children's bonding with the parents instead of child care workers. Because we value healthy employees and social interaction among them, we run a cafeteria that serves healthy, organic, mostly vegetarian food. Most of the bathrooms have showers to accommodate lunchtime runners, volleyball players, or surfers. Of course, we offer generous discounts on employee purchases. None of these benefits are particularly expensive for the company except, increasingly, health care. The child care program, with tax subsidies, pays for itself, and the cafeteria requires only a small company subsidy. Yet Patagonia is consistently included in lists of the 100 best companies to work for or for working mothers. Why on earth would anyone run a company that was hard to work for? Management philosophy. We've had psychologists who specialize in organizational development tell us that Patagonia has a far above average number of very independent-minded employees. In fact, our employees are so independent, we're told, that they would be considered unemployable in a typical company. We don't hire the kind of people you can order around, like the foot soldiers in an army who charge from their foxholes without question when their sergeant yells, "Let's go, boys." We don't want drones who will simply follow directions. We want the kind of employee who will question the wisdom of something he regards as a bad decision. We do want people who, once they buy into a decision and believe in what they are doing, will work like demons to produce something of the highest possible quality, whether a shirt, a catalog, a store display, or a computer program. How you get these highly individualistic people to align and work for a common cause is the art of management at Patagonia. Since we can't order our employees around, either they have to be convinced that what they are being asked to do is right, or they have to see for themselves it's right. Some independent people, until the point that they get it or it becomes their idea, will outright refuse to do a job. Or worse, you get a passive-aggressive response so that you think the job will be done, but in the end the person just won't do it, a more polite but more costly form of refusal. In a company as complex as ours, no one person has the answer to our problems, but each has a part of the solution. The best democracy exists when decisions are made through consensus, when everyone comes to an agreement that the decision made is the correct one. Decisions based on compromise often leave the problem not completely solved, with both sides feeling cheated or unimportant, or worse, as in the biblical example of Solomon, cutting the baby in half to settle the dispute between two harlots claiming the same baby. The key to building a consensus for action is good communication. A chief in an American Indian tribe was not elected because he was the richest or had a strong political machine. He was chosen chief because of his oratory skills, which were invaluable for building consensus within the tribe. In this information age, it's tempting for managers to manage from their desks, staring at their computer screens and sending out instructions, instead of managing by walking about and talking to people. The best managers are never at their desks yet can be easily found and approached by everyone reporting to them. Patagonia's offices support these ideas. No one has a private office in our company, and everyone works in open rooms with no doors or separations. What we lose in quiet thinking space is more than made up for with better communication and an egalitarian atmosphere. Animals and humans that live in groups or flocks constantly learn from one another. Our cafeteria, besides serving healthy organic food, is convenient for everyone and is open all day as an informal meeting place. When you look to hire management, it is important to know the difference between leaders and managers. For instance, a branch manager of a bank is expected to avoid risk, not make loans without approval from higher up. Managers have short-term vision, implement strategic plans, and keep things running as they always have. Leaders take risks, have long-term vision, create the strategic plans, and instigate change. The best leadership is by example. Melinda's and my office space is like everyone else's, and we always try to be available. We don't have special parking places for ourselves or for any upper management. The best spaces are reserved for fuel-efficient cars, no matter who owns them. Melinda and I pay for our own lunches in our cafeteria, otherwise it would send a message to the employees that it's okay to take from the company. A familial company like ours runs on trust rather than on authoritarian rule. Maybe a few people take advantage of our flex time and our let my people go surfing policy, but none of our best employees would want to work in a company that didn't have that trust. They understand that my so-called MBA style of management by absence, is as much a sign of my trust in them as my desire to be out of the office. Subscribing to the concept of natural growth of the company helps keep us small enough to be manageable. I believe that for the best communication and to avoid bureaucracy, you should ideally have no more than 100 people working in one location. This is an extension of the fact that democracy seems to work best in small societies, where people have a sense of personal responsibility. In a small Sherpa or Inuit village, there's no need to hire trash collectors or firemen, everyone takes care of community problems. And there's no need for police. Evil has a hard time hiding from peer pressure. The most efficient size for a city is supposed to be about 250,000 to 350,000 people, large enough to have all the culture and amenities of a city and still be governable, like Santa Barbara, Auckland, and Florence. Finding that balance between the management problems that come with growth and maintaining our philosophy of hiring independent-minded people and trusting them with responsibility is key to Patagonia's success. Every company also has its ideal size. Although Melinda and I have always been closely involved in the direction and operation of Patagonia, we've always had a CEO as well. The fact that Patagonia has had 6 CEOs in its 30 years can be regarded as a failure to find and keep the right person, or as the failure of Patagonia's 2 hard-headed owners to relinquish power. Looking back, I see that each person brought with him a diverse set of skills that have been valuable to the company, whether he came from a background of retail, finance, biology, ex-SEAL team, or education. However, it's hard to find one person who can do everything well. For example, the shoot-from-the-hip turnaround artist you hire to downsize your company may not be the CEO you need to run things after the company has been stabilized. And the person in charge of creating a new retail store usually has a different set of skills from the manager of a store that's been open and operating. The first needs to be expedient and creative, the second more nurturing. A study done of the most successful CEOs in America, not the celebrity CEOs, but those who, without fanfare and jumping jobs every few years, get the work done, found one factor they all have in common: they enjoy working with their hands. The older ones had cars that they worked on in high school, when you could still work on your own car, or had wood shops in their garages where they made furniture. When a faucet needed a washer or a door wouldn't close properly, they did it themselves. When there's a problem of any kind, these people have the confidence to think it through and solve it themselves instead of looking for a repairman. The longevity of a CEO's career is directly proportional to his problem-solving skills and ability to adapt and grow with the job. When a problem comes up, the effective CEO does not immediately hire a consultant. Outsiders don't know your business the way you do, and anyway, I've found that most consultants come from a failed business. Only by confronting the problems and trying to solve them yourself will you prevent them from happening again in another form. The key to confronting and truly solving any problem is to continue to ask enough questions to get past all the symptoms and reach the actual cause, a form of the Socratic method, or what Toyota management calls asking the 5 whys. Here's a typical problem we experienced recently. Our sales in all channels of distribution in Japan took a 30% dive in November and December 2003. We asked why. Well, we had 20% of our inventory in puffy down and synthetic fill jackets because those had been the big fashion items the winter before, and we expected the same response in 2003, but it wasn't happening. We started blaming ourselves for not being on top of the Japanese fashion trends, but we needed to ask more questions. Was business also down with other products in our winter line? Yes. We could have stopped here and come to the conclusion that Patagonia was out of fashion in the volatile Japanese market, and we would have started dumping our inventory of black down jackets. But we asked more questions. How were the other companies and dealers doing? Their businesses were also down. Why? The weather in November and December was unseasonably warm. No one was selling winter clothing. So we hung on and didn't dump our inventory. In January it finally got cold, the ski areas got snow, and sales suddenly went up. We quickly sold out our inventory of cold weather clothing without having to put it on sale. Had we acted after asking only a few questions, we never would have gotten to the real cause: no cold weather. The owners and managers of a business that wants to be around for the next 100 years had better love change. The most important mandate for a manager in a dynamic company is to instigate change. In his book The Beak of the Finch, Jonathan Chouinard talks about an insect that was found preserved in amber. The specimen, millions of years old, is identical in appearance to that species living today, with one big difference. The present-day insect has developed the ability to shed its legs and regenerate new ones after touching plants covered with pesticides. Surprisingly, this ability has evolved just since the time of World War II, when pesticide use began. The lesson to be learned is that evolution, change, doesn't happen without stress, and it can happen quickly. The 48% of the American population who don't believe in the process of evolution, the evangelical conservatives who believe the earth and its creatures were created by God only 10,000 years ago, see change as a threat rather than an opportunity to grow and evolve to a higher level. Climbing mountains is another process that serves as an example for both business and life. Many people don't understand that how you climb a mountain is more important than reaching the top. You can solo climb Everest without using oxygen, or you can pay guides and Sherpas to carry your loads, put ladders across crevasses, lay in 6,000 feet of fixed ropes, and have one Sherpa pulling and one pushing you. You just dial in 10,000 feet on your oxygen bottle, and up you go. Typical high-powered, rich plastic surgeons and CEOs who attempt to climb Everest this way are so fixated on the target, the summit, that they compromise on the process. The goal of climbing big, dangerous mountains should be to attain some sort of spiritual and personal growth, but this won't happen if you compromise away the entire process. Just as doing risk sports will create stresses that lead to a bettering of oneself, so should a company constantly stress itself in order to grow. Our company has always done its best work whenever we've had a crisis. I've never been so proud of our employees as in 1994, when the entire company was mobilized to change over from using traditional cotton to organically grown by 1996. It was crisis that led to writing down our philosophies. When there is no crisis, the wise leader or CEO will invent one. Not by crying wolf but by challenging the employees with change. As Bob Dylan says, "He not busy being born is busy dying." New employees coming into a company with a strong culture and values may think that they shouldn't rock the boat and shouldn't challenge the status quo. On the contrary, while values should never change, every organization, business, government, or religion must be adaptive and resilient and constantly embrace new ideas and methods of operation. Environmental philosophy. Anyone who believes exponential growth can go on forever in a finite world is either a madman or a politician. Miklos S. Dora, paraphrasing Kenneth Boulding, Surfer's Journal. I'm a total pessimist about the fate of the natural world. In my lifetime I've seen nothing but a constant deterioration of all of the processes that are essential to maintaining healthy life on planet Earth. Most of the scientists and deep thinkers in the environmental field that I know personally are also pessimistic, and they believe that we are experiencing an extremely accelerated extinction of species, including, possibly, much of the human race. In Edward O. Wilson's book The Future of Life, he describes the time we live in as nature's last stand. His Living Planet Index, which measures the condition of the world's forests and freshwater and marine ecosystems, puts humanity in crisis and at an environmental bottleneck of our own making. The 21st century must become the century of the environment, Wilson insists. If government, the private sector, and science don't begin to cooperate immediately to address issues of environmental degradation, the Earth will lose its ability to regenerate. In other words, life as we know it is toast. I'm pessimistic because I see no will in society to do enough about the impending doom. Yet there's no difference between a pessimist who says, "It's all over, don't bother trying to do anything, forget about voting, it won't make a difference," and an optimist who says, "Relax, everything is going to turn out fine." Either way the results are the same. Nothing gets done. I also prefer to believe that in the most basic terms, evil is a stronger influence than good. By evil I mean something morally bad and destructive. Over and over I've seen so many institutions, governments, religions, corporations, and even sports become more evil when they could easily be doing more good. But believing this keeps me on my toes, keeps me from getting bit from behind, keeps me from becoming a victim. Thinking these dark thoughts doesn't depress me, in fact I'm a happy person. I'm a Buddhist about it all. I've accepted the fact that there is a beginning and an end to everything. Maybe the human species has run its course and it's time for us to go away and leave room for other, one hopes, more intelligent and responsible, life forms. I've found the cure for depression is action, and action is the basis for the environmental philosophy at Patagonia. Since our main reason for being in business is to work on changing the way governments and corporations ignore our environmental crisis, action is absolutely necessary. I've always believed that the key to the government's doing the right thing is to base its planning on the premise that the society will be around for 100 years. The Iroquois nation extended its planning out even farther, 7 generations into the future. If our government acted this way, it would not clear-cut the last old-growth forests or build dams that silt up in 20 years. It would not encourage its citizens to have more children just because doing so equates to more consumers. If I really believe in the rightness of such long-term planning, then Patagonia as a company must do the same. When I think of stewardship or sustainability, I think back to when I was a GI in Korea, where I saw farmers pouring night soil on rice paddies that had been in continuous use for over 3,000 years. Each generation of farmers assumed responsibility for leaving the land in better condition than when they took possession of it. Contrast this approach with that of modern agribusiness, in the Midwest, which wastes a bushel of topsoil to grow 1 bushel of corn and pumps out groundwater at a rate 25% faster than it's being replenished. A responsible government would encourage farmers to be good stewards of the land and to practice sustainable agriculture. But why should only the farmer or the fisherman or forester have the responsibility to see that the earth remains habitable for future generations of humans and other wild things? I can think of only a few examples of truly sustainable economic endeavors that can be done in any way other than on a micro scale. These are selective forestry and fishing and small-scale agriculture. Because these are essentially the products of sunlight, and the sun is free, it's possible to produce them without using up more material and energy than ends up in the final product, that is, no waste. This sustainability also relies on the assumption that the main nutrient sources, soil and water, aren't being depleted by other endeavors. The word sustainable is another of those words, like gourmet and adventure, that have been so overused and misused as to become meaningless. Sustainable development is far from sustainable, and gourmet hamburgers need not be very tasty to be so named. Every definition of adventure in Webster's denotes an element of risk, yet adventure travel is almost always risk-free. A good example of a sustainable lifestyle was the salmon culture of the indigenous people of the Pacific Northwest, before colonization by Europeans in the 18th century. The salmon came into the rivers every year, and the people took what they needed, and no more. They let the rest go on to spawn and produce more salmon for the future. Their use of the forest was also sustainable because it was selective and was done on an appropriate scale. Contrast this with the modern practices of salmon fishing, in which large diesel-powered boats run around the ocean catching both mature and immature salmon of mixed species, some of which, like kojo or steelhead, are endangered. The aggregate fisheries, even when they are targeting one species like the Fraser River sockeye in British Columbia, make no distinction among sockeye originating from any of the 24 or so streams that make up the overall Fraser River runs. In some of these tributaries their runs have shrunk to only a few hundred remaining endangered individuals. One solution to the problem of a sustainable salmon fishery in Canada is to stop commercial fishing for salmon in the ocean, as Iceland has done, and let the fish come into the rivers, where they can be selectively caught with fish traps, fish wheels, and weirs. The non-targeted fish, like steelhead, can be released to provide a lucrative sport fishery. Another solution would be to use a fine mesh tangle tooth net that holds the fish by their teeth and keeps them alive so the non-targeted fish can be sorted out. Modern industrial forestry provides some of the best examples of non-sustainable agriculture. Modern forestry is considered agriculture, the reason why the U.S. Forest Service is under the Department of Agriculture and not the Department of the Interior. Our forests are treated as crops to be harvested, then replanted or allowed to regenerate on their own, to be cut again and replanted ad infinitum, a so-called renewable resource. Clear cutting is the most cost-effective method of harvest, and it gets rid of the undesirable undergrowth and low-value trees like the hemlock and alder. Then the land can be burned over and replanted in a monocrop like Douglas fir. The trouble is, nature doesn't like monocrops. Clear cutting, with its attendant road building, subsidized by the Forest Service, causes erosion, which silts up the rivers and destroys the salmon runs. The second-growth trees produce lower quality wood and are more susceptible to diseases, such as the virus that is threatening Douglas fir farms in the Northwest. A third crop requires massive amounts of fertilizers, and it is doubtful that a fourth crop could even be grown, hardly the definition of a renewable resource. Much of what I know about achieving any measure of sustainability in an economic activity, I learned in trying to grow my own garden. The land where I live happens to be part of the 90% of the earth where you can't do agriculture except for some limited grazing. My soil is a heavy, impenetrable clay. To break up the clay, I first had to double dig, breaking 2 shovel handles in the process. I had to bring in sand from the beach, mushroom compost, horse shit, from a local mushroom farm, and gypsum to break down the clay further. The soil is very alkali, so I had to add sulfur. It is also nitrogen poor, so I brought in chicken, llama, and cow manure, plus composted sea kelp and worm castings from the worm composter at the Patagonia cafeteria and from our home kitchen scrap composter. I had to plant nitrogen-fixing clover and fava beans as cover crops. After years of effort, I can finally say I have good soil that requires only the yearly addition of good compost. However, we would have starved if that had been our only source of food. With all the addition of these amendments from the outside, my little 200-square-foot garden may now be called organic but could hardly be called sustainable. In fact, my soil is probably still lacking the 5 billion bacteria, 20 million fungi, and 1 million protists that reside in just a teaspoon of virgin topsoil. Nature has deemed that all these organisms are necessary for creating healthy new soil, fixing nitrogen, and releasing from bedrock the trace minerals that are so vital to human health. A study by the UK's Medical Research Council in 1991 showed that vegetables had lost up to 75% of their nutrients since 1940, meats had lost half their minerals, and fruits had lost about 2/3. The so-called green revolution of modern agribusiness, which relies on petroleum, is completely non-sustainable. David Pimentel, at Cornell University, has estimated that if all the world ate and farmed the way the United States does, we would exhaust all known global fossil fuel reserves in just over 7 years. According to the National Geographic, it takes 8 barrels of oil to produce 1 cow. Modern agriculture wastes topsoil at the rate of 1 inch a year, while it takes nature 1,000 years to produce that inch of productive soil. In the Midwest, a bushel of topsoil is destroyed for every bushel of corn grown. Agribusiness relies on massive amounts of fossil fuel fertilizers and toxic chemicals. It pumps groundwater for irrigation at a rate far greater than it is being replenished, and in the end it produces less food than can be grown with small-scale organic farming. The Japanese farmer Masanobu Fukuoka, in his book The One-Straw Revolution, tells of producing the same amount of rice per acre as industrial agriculture without tilling the soil or flooding the fields or using any chemicals. John Yvon's at Ecology Action in California, using bio-intensive methods, reports that it has been able to produce 4 to 6 times more vegetables per acre than farms using mechanized and chemical agricultural techniques. In my own garden, I've never had to use any type of toxic chemical or artificial fertilizer because the plants are healthy and have a natural resistance to disease and insects. I rotate my crops, and I also mix up my plants to have diversity, so there is not the monocrop attraction to insects and disease. I also allow 100 swallows to build nests under the eaves of my roof, so no flying insect has a chance of surviving my natural air force. When the Soviet Union broke up in 1989, the United States sent over a group of so-called experts from the ultra-conservative Chicago School of Economics. Their idea for what to do with the failed, massive collective farms was not to turn them back into small, family-owned plots, but to keep them intact as giant agri-corporations and sell stock in them. Diversity and sustainability are vital to natural systems of living things, but it's not always clear how these traits translate into good business practice. We begin with the assumption that our business relies on natural resources to stay alive, and we are therefore a part of the system and obligated to maintain it. We embrace diversity and sustainability in all aspects of business. At Patagonia, the protection and preservation of the natural environment aren't just something we do after hours or when we finish our regular work, they're the reason we are in business. We'd have the same environmental philosophy if we were a cabinet shop, a winery, or a building contractor. I believe, as do most of our employees, that the health of our home planet is the bottom line, and it's a responsibility we all must share. While Patagonia's other philosophies evolved out of our successes and failures in trying to be the best company, for the most part they apply directly to running the business. In a sense, they grew outward from our experiences inside the company. Our environmental philosophy evolved differently, coming to us from outside. It was the extent of the world's environmental crisis that compelled me to make changes at Patagonia. We're not only using less paper and electricity or making clothes from recycled materials but also going out into the world to work on solving those environmental issues that are putting the future of the natural world at risk. A successful, long-lived, and productive company like Patagonia could be compared, on the most basic level, with a healthy environment, simply in the fact that both are composed of various elements that must function together in some kind of balance in order for the whole system to work. If we fill the Earth's atmosphere with excess carbon dioxide and that causes a global rise in temperature, it also affects the oceans, forests, prairies, and everything and everyone living in those places. Correspondingly, if I were to change drastically one department at Patagonia without considering the effects on the rest of the company, the result would be chaos. No businessman in his right mind would, for example, intentionally cripple his accounting department without thought of the consequences to the rest of the company. Yet that's exactly what's being done to the environment. Entire ecosystems are being destroyed or converted without consideration to the overall health of the planet. Unfortunately, most of the environmental damage being done by business is the result of large corporations that aren't operating under the philosophy of sustainability, for either themselves or the environment. They're applying their own short-term business principles to a natural system that can operate only in the long term. Neither government nor business uses full cost accounting in its use of resources. In fact, the government's indicator for the health of the economy is the GNP, Gross National Product, which does not factor in the cost of goods, it only indicates sales. So, when there is a national catastrophe like a forest fire, war, or flood and resources are destroyed, the GNP goes up because money was spent on labor and materials. No debit is made in the national ledger for the loss of those natural resources. It has been estimated that the true social and environmental cost of a hamburger when the forest has been cleared to create pasture land for grazing cattle is $200. Instead of adapting precautionary principles, we embraced new technologies, like nuclear power, genetically modified foods, pesticides, and other toxic chemicals with an attitude of innocent until proved guilty, and it's left up to you and me to establish the guilt. In the tropical rainforest, biologically the richest region on Earth, we are exterminating species far faster than we can discover or name them, let alone determine their potential to benefit us in the form of medicine or food. More important, We don't know their role in the ecosystem and how their absence might disrupt it in catastrophic ways. We do know that nature has already been disrupted, on a grand scale worldwide, in the form of global warming and climate change. However ingeniously adaptive and self-healing nature may be, human industry, especially during the past century, wreaks change far more quickly than nature can deal with it. Where we tip the balance, we yield desert, and at some point we may tip the balance planet-wide. At that point all mitigating human effort becomes, in Keynes's memorable phrase, like pushing on a string. We are the last generation that can experience true wilderness. Already the world has shrunk dramatically. To a Frenchman, the Pyrenees are wild. To a kid living in a New York City ghetto, Central Park is wilderness, the way Griffith Park in Burbank was to me when I was a kid. Even travelers in Patagonia forget that its giant, wild-looking estancias are really just overgrazed sheep farms. New Zealand and Scotland were once forested and populated with long-forgotten animals. The place in the lower 48 states that is farthest away from a road or habitation is at the headwaters of the Snake River in Wyoming, and it's still only 25 miles. So if you define wilderness as a place that is more than a day's walk from civilization, there is no true wilderness left in North America, except in parts of Alaska and Canada. We need to protect these areas of unaltered wildness and diversity to have a baseline, so we never forget what the real world is like, in perfect balance, the way nature intended the Earth to be. This is the model we need to keep in mind on our way toward sustainability. In a recent article in Science, ecological economist Robert Costanza argued, "We've been cooking the books for a long time by leaving out the worth of nature." The researchers compared the economic value of maintaining intact ecosystems versus exploiting them for economic gain. Specifically, they weighed the economic benefits of maintaining Thailand's wild mangroves and Cameroon's native tropical forest in their current states against the net benefits of converting them to shrimp farms and rubber plantations, respectively. They found that the economic benefits of intact nature, in climate regulation, soil formation, nutrients cycling, and fuel, food, fibers, and pharmaceutical products from wild species, outstripped exploitation by a conservative estimate of 100 to 1. They also posited the question, what would be the economic value of increasing the world's paltry annual outlay of $6.5 billion for habitat preservation to $45 billion, enough to create meaningful contiguous wildland reserves? They estimated nature's resulting gift back to the economy at $440 trillion to $520 trillion. Patagonia's environmental efforts began in the 1970s simply trying to prevent physical damage to the rock walls of Yosemite. It was about clean climbing and making high-quality products that weren't disposable. Later we started looking at minimizing the environmental harm associated with manufacturing our products. As we became more aware of the current crisis, we broadened our efforts to include correcting and cleaning up the potentially fatal environmental damage we as a society are inflicting on our planet and ourselves. Our mission statement reflects this evolution by saying we will cause no unnecessary harm, and it ends with our resolution to use business to inspire and implement solutions to the environmental crisis. This is an ambitious statement. To make it more than just talk, we had to lay out a framework, or a set of guidelines, to keep us on track. This led to the formulation of the most complex and far-reaching of Patagonia's philosophies, our environmental philosophy. I would summarize the elements of this philosophy as follows: 1. Lead an examined life. 2. Clean up our own act. 3. Do our penance. 4. Support civil democracy. 5. Influence other companies. I don't really believe that humans are evil, it's just that we are not very intelligent animals. No animal is so stupid and greedy as to foul its own nest, except humans. We are certainly not smart enough to foretell the long-term results of our everyday actions. The brilliant scientist or entrepreneur businessman who invents or develops a new technology is often incapable of seeing the dark side of his ideas, Whether it's atomic energy, television, or farmed salmon. The problem is a failure of the imagination. In the sycophantic biography of George W. Bush, The Right Man, The Surprise Presidency of George W. Bush, by David Frum, the worst thing said about him is that he was uncurious. Uncurious people do not lead examined lives, they cannot see causes that lie deeper than the surface. They believe in blind faith, and the most frightening thing about blind faith is that it in turn leads to an inability, even an unwillingness, to accept facts. Consider results from a recent survey from the University of Maryland, where researchers found that even after the CIA had issued its final report that there had been no weapons of mass destruction in Iraq, 72% of people surveyed who supported President Bush still believed that there were. An even higher percentage, contrary to all evidence, believed that Iraq and al-Qaeda were linked. Even more frightening than an electorate unable, unwilling, to allow facts to shape its reality is that it has elected a president and, to an increasing number of its members, a Congress whose views and policies are influenced by faith over fact. For the first time in our history, Bill Moyers said in a recent speech at Harvard, ideology and theology hold a monopoly of power in Washington. Moyers went on to evoke the memory of James Watt, Reagan's Secretary of the Interior, who stated, in public testimony, that after the last tree is felled, Christ will come back. Moyers then listed a few of the 45 senators and 186 members of Congress who earned 80 to 100% approval ratings from the three most influential Christian advocacy groups. These politicians are in office because they are supported by the growing legions of our population who literally interpret the Bible to conclude that the apocalypse is imminent. And people who believe the end of the world is around the corner can't be expected, as the journalist Glenn Shearer wrote in the online environmental magazine Grist, to worry about the environment. Why care about the earth when the droughts, floods, famine and pestilence brought by ecological collapse are signs of the apocalypse foretold in the Bible? Students of anthropology won't be surprised by such developments. Frequently in cultures facing deep crises there emerge cults and movements usually led by messianic leaders promising to deliver true believers to a promised land free of the pain suffered in day-to-day life in societies facing collapse. Are Jerry Falwell and Pat Robertson the new messiahs? I don't think so, but if history is a guide, the emergence of one may be in our near future. What should be our reaction? The only useful response is at every opportunity to preach as loudly and as forcefully as we can our own sermon of a reality in which facts trump faith. To recognize that most of the damage we cause to the planet is the result of our own ignorance, to recognize that we cannot afford to go about blindly doing unnecessary damage simply because we lack curiosity. Uncovering problems, and ultimately finding solutions, require not only allowing facts to influence your faith but also asking lots of questions, hard questions. Most of the damage we cause to the planet is a result of our own ignorance. We go about blindly doing unnecessary damage because we are uncurious. Uncovering problems and ultimately finding solutions require asking a lot of questions. But I've found that asking one or two questions isn't sufficient. In fact, that often leads to a false sense of security. For example, if you want to feed your family healthy food, you have to start asking a lot of questions. If you merely ask, "Is this salmon fresh?" you may feel good about the answer. But if you follow that question with, "Is it wild or farmed?" Or "Does this chicken have added hormones?" Or "What do all those chemical ingredients mean that are listed on that label of Twinkies?" you'll start to reach the truth. Unfortunately, the grocery clerk can't help you. You're going to have to educate yourself. We had to do the same with Patagonia. We wanted to do the right thing, we didn't want to cause unnecessary harm, but in the beginning we hardly even knew what questions to ask. One of the hardest things for a business to do is to investigate the environmental effects of its most successful product and, if it's bad, to change it or pull it off the shelves. Imagine that you're the owner of a company that makes landmines. You're employing people, and you're one of the best employers around, giving people jobs and benefits, but you've never thought about what landmines actually do. And then one day you go to Bosnia or Cambodia or Mozambique, and you see all these maimed innocent people, and you say, wow. This is what landmines do? You can either get out of the landmine business, or tobacco or fast food, or continue, knowing what your products really do. So Patagonia started looking for its own landmines. In 1991, we began an environmental assessment program to examine our own products, and just as we had suspected, everything we make pollutes. But we all were surprised at how bad the news was. Sustainable manufacturing is an oxymoron. We conducted a life cycle analysis of the 4 major fibers we use: wool, polyester, nylon, and cotton. Synthetics, such as polyester and nylon, are obvious villains because they're made from petroleum, but it turns out that the production of natural products like cotton and wool are no better, and in some cases worse, for the environment. Let's take wool, for example. Wool can be very damaging or benign, depending on whether the sheep are grazing in fragile desert environments and alpine meadows or in areas with frequent rain, plenty of natural grass, and no predators. Wool also often relies on chemicals at every stage. The sheep are dipped in pesticides to kill parasites, the fleece is scoured with petroleum-based detergents, the yarn is bleached with chlorine and then dyed with heavy metal-based dyes. The workers exposed to the chemical sheep dips may suffer neurological damage. Orlon, a synthetic substitute for wool, is made from oil and is therefore not sustainable, so it seems that using any kind of wool would be a more natural and sustainable option than a synthetic substitute. But if you wanted to replace the output of one Orlon mill with wool, you would have to devote every acre from Maine to the Mississippi exclusively to the raising of sheep. In fact, at our present rate of consumption, we can no longer clothe the world with natural fibers. Any attempt to achieve sustainability on this planet with over 6 billion of us is doomed to fail. But rather than shut the doors, bury our cars, and become hermits, we can work toward sustainability, recognizing that it's an ever-receding summit. At Patagonia, we asked more questions. For example, were the neon-colored dyes used to dye our nylon toxic? After finding out what they were, we switched to dyes made in Germany that were less toxic in every color except orange, and we didn't do any more orange. For a company accustomed to simply ordering pre-dyed fabric from a salesman's book, the question of dye toxicity added a level of complexity that changed the way we had to think. Most businesses wouldn't want to deal with creating unnecessary problems. Most people, governments, and businesses don't want to ask the Toyota 5 whys because continuing to ask follow-up questions could lead to finding the real causes of their problems, more often than not environmental, which in turn would force them to make a change or be left with feelings of guilt. And there is money to be made in endlessly working on symptoms, like starting resource wars to protect our gas-killing way of life rather than work on energy efficiency, or working to cure cancer with a pill rather than address its environmental causes. I had a friend, Rel Sun, who was an international surfing champion and one of the most elegant longboarders who ever lived. She developed breast cancer when she was just 32. She traced her disease back to her childhood in Waianae, Hawaii, where there is an unusually high cluster of cancers. She remembered when she was a child, running after the skeeter truck that was coming back from spraying the sugarcane fields with DDT and other chemicals. The empty trucks would load up with water and spray the dirt roads to keep the dust down, while the kids hung on the back of the truck to cool off in the toxic spray. No one knew then what those chemicals would eventually do. Relson died of her cancer at age 47. At the time of our fiber study, we were manufacturing a lot of fleece jackets made from virgin polyester, the only kind of polyester available. So we worked with a company called Wellman to find alternatives. They developed a process that takes soda pop bottles, which are also made of polyester, and recycles them into raw material for jackets. It takes 25 bottles to make a jacket, and from 1993 through 2003 we diverted 86 million soda bottles from landfills. For every 150 virgin polyester jackets that we replaced with post-consumer recycled, PCR, polyester, we saved 42 gallons of oil and prevented a half-ton of toxic air emissions. Cotton is another story altogether, but it shows both the lengths we are willing to go to in order to do the right thing and the extent of the world's environmental crisis. Although cotton was grown without the use of chemicals for most of its known 4,000-year history, today 25% of the annual worldwide insecticide use and 10% of the annual worldwide pesticide use are applied to conventionally grown cotton, even though cotton fields occupy less than 3% of the world's farmland. Many of these chemicals were originally formulated as nerve gases for warfare, so it's no surprise that higher rates of birth defects and cancer have been found in both humans and wildlife surrounding the cotton fields. Knowing that there is a viable alternative, we chose to go organic. Not to do so would have been unconscionable. It would have violated our basic principle of making the best quality product with the least unnecessary environmental harm. But you don't just call the manufacturer and ask to be switched over to organic cotton. Our decision began a long process of self-education. First, we found that very little certified organic cotton was being grown anywhere in the world. Organic farming is much more labor-intensive. The farmers must work the fields constantly, checking for hazards to plant health. Weeding and composting also require extra labor. Defoliation has to be done naturally, without toxic chemicals, so the mechanical cotton pickers can then be used. After the organically grown cotton leaves the field, nearly every step in production, ginning, spinning, and knitting or weaving, incurs greater costs. Because of the limited demand, higher per pound cotton prices, the greater cost of using non-toxic defoliants, and the fact that raw cotton is not as clean to work with, the overall price of organic cotton is subsequently 50 to 100% higher. Nevertheless, in the summer of 1994 our board of directors voted that all conventionally grown cotton had to be eliminated by the spring of 1996. At the time, sportswear made from cotton was 20% of our total business, and for the company to change to organic cotton had a huge emotional and financial price. The probable loss of revenue and profit because of the higher cost of organics was a great unknown. We dropped some successful cotton products because we couldn't develop the fabrics, and we feverishly prepared ourselves for the switch. Many of our existing fabric vendors refused to participate in our process of switching over to organic cotton, mostly because of a lack of alternative suppliers and their skepticism about the market potential. The staff at Patagonia had to go back all the way to the beginning of the supply chain. We searched out cotton brokers with access to bales of organic cotton. Of all the fabric mills we ended up using for our supply of organic cotton, only 2 had had prior experience working with it. We had to pay 3 times more for our cotton fabric in 1996 than it cost in 1995, and there were fewer types available. We cut the cotton product line accordingly, from 91 styles down to 66. 2 decisions facilitated our switch to organic products. First, we decided to use transitional cotton temporarily as well as certified organic. Transitional cotton is grown using all the organic processes, but the practices haven't been in place long enough to earn official certification. Second, we decided that we would sell clothing made with organically grown cotton rather than organic clothing. The difference seems small, but we didn't want to mislead buyers about the fact that we would still be using synthetic dyes and conventional cotton thread in the production. We had found that natural dyes not only failed to meet our quality standards but had significant environmental problems of their own. Cotton thread is a mass-produced product that would require us to order huge minimum quantities of unknown quality. Further, while we learned and experimented with the new materials, we used a low-formaldehyde resin in 2 styles for 1996 to minimize wrinkling and shrinkage. Once again, we struggled with the conflict between our environmental standards and our quality standards. We faced the fact that it made no sense to turn around and put all the toxic chemicals back into the finished fabric to keep it from shrinking or wrinkling, two logical reasons why all those chemicals had been introduced to the material over the years. In fact, a typical cotton product labeled 100% cotton is on average only 73% cotton, all the rest is resins, plasticizers, and chemicals added in the finishing process. In the end, we solved the chemical problem by putting the quality back in the product construction instead of adding synthetic substances. In some cases, we had to use a higher quality, longer staple cotton and pre-shrink the yarn and fabric. We realized as we switched over to organic cotton that we really didn't know much about how cotton as a material is processed or finished. In the past, when we wanted some fabric for pants, for example, we would call a salesman who would show us a sample book of fabrics, and we merely had to browse through and make a selection. Now we had to begin with bales of raw cotton and bird dog the entire process through to the finished goods. Meanwhile, the marketing and sales team had settled on 3 goals for the spring 1996 organic cotton line: to sell the line successfully, to influence the rest of the apparel industry to use organic cotton, and to encourage growth in organic cotton farming. The last 2 obviously hinged on the first goal of having the product sell. We broke with our usual policy and hired an outside consultant, who confirmed our belief that the single most significant reason for a consumer making a purchase from us is quality. Brand name and price were secondary, and environmental concerns were least important to the purchaser. The consultant also found that small increases in retail prices were acceptable, so we reduced our margins on most of the items so the retail price would not exceed $2 to $10 over conventional cotton. Items that could not meet this goal were limited to our own retail and mail order channels to keep the prices down. Our organic cotton program has been a success, but not just because our customers are making the same choice we made, to pay more now for organics rather than pay the hidden environmental costs down the road, but because our designers and production people now have to begin their work with a bale of raw cotton and follow it all the way through the process of becoming a finished garment. They had to learn how to make clothing. The extra effort translated into products that are carefully thought out, and as a consequence they sell well. The fact that it's a natural product is not the reason most people buy it, but it's an important added value. Every time we've elected to do the right thing, even when it costs twice as much to do it that way, it's turned out to be more profitable. This strengthens my confidence that we're headed in the right direction. Our environmental assessment program educates us, and with education we have choices. When we act positively on solving problems instead of trying to find a way around them, we're farther along on the path toward sustainability. Plus, we are constantly discovering more things we can do. Switching from industrially grown and processed cotton to organically grown is a positive step forward but doesn't completely solve the problem. Even when cotton is grown without toxic chemicals, it still uses an inordinate amount of water and cannot be grown year after year without permanently depleting the soil. When a cotton garment is worn out, it is usually thrown away. We have to dig deeper and try to make products that close the loop, clothing that can be recycled infinitely into similar or equal products. We have to accept the responsibility for what happens to each product when it reaches the end of its life cycle, just as a computer manufacturer should be responsible for what happens to its old model computers that are no longer usable and are too toxic to send to the landfill. In accepting responsibility for our products, we must look at more than just the major fabrics. Here are 3 examples of where we've had to find a way to clean up the effects of individual components of a product. In Portugal, where all our flannel shirts are made, the factories that dye the cloth are located along a river near Porto. Each dye house takes in water and then pours it back into the river after using it, so by the time the river reaches the last dye house downstream, it's all black and polluted. This last dye house had to install expensive German equipment to clean the water before it could use it, but it also decided to run the water through the cleaners again before putting it back into the river. This dye house, the one that discharges clean water, is the one that we chose to do our dyeing. Polyvinyl chloride, PVC, is a toxic, carcinogenic plastic used everywhere in our society. It's in the coating on durable vinyl luggage, and it's a plasticizer for printing on shirts. We spent years trying to eliminate its use throughout the company and have found a way to take it out of all of our products, the sole exception being the foam on the Lotus Designs life jackets and some print on shirts, but we are still actively working on that. Antimony, a toxic heavy metal, is used in the making of polyester resin. Yes, those soda pop bottles that we make Singula fleece from have antimony in the plastic, and cola, according to architect and designer William McDonough, is a good catalyst for releasing the antimony. We are working on switching to antimony-free polyester, but as you can imagine, getting the plastic chemical industry to change is not easy. Our effort to minimize the impact of our internal operations began in the early 1980s, when one of the maintenance employees asked if I knew how much it cost Patagonia to be lining every wastebasket with a plastic bag. We were spending $1,200 a year for plastic bags that just went straight to the dump every day. I told him to get rid of them. But he came back the next day and said the janitorial service refused to clean the unlined baskets if people threw away wet garbage, like coffee grounds or food. So we gave each employee a personal trash can for recyclable paper and made everyone responsible for disposing of his or her wet garbage in separate containers scattered throughout the offices. Soon after, we started recycling all paper, with everyone responsible for her own recycling as well. The result is a company-wide recycling effort that also saves the company money. Another employee recommended eliminating the styrofoam and paper cups used in our cafeteria and at the water fountains. Employees started using their own cups, and guests are handed porcelain cups for their coffee. This saves another $800 a year. These amounts may not seem like much, but the important point is that each time we tried to do the right thing for the environment, regardless of the cost to us, we ended up saving money. These cost savings were only the tip of the iceberg. Reusing cardboard boxes in the mailroom saves $1,000 a year. Using our recycled, reused computer paper on the child care center's diaper changing tables saves $1,200 a year, and the list goes on. After conducting an energy audit of all our facilities, we changed over to energy-efficient lighting, repainted several wood ceilings white to reflect light, and put in skylights and innovative heating and cooling technologies. This amounted to a 25% savings in electricity. All our company-owned facilities in California are powered by green wind power. In 2005 we installed solar photovoltaic panels to power part of our Ventura offices. This is $1 million investment, but between the tax rebates and lower electricity bills, we should break even in only a few years. Seeing the causes of problems within the scope of the company is difficult enough. Once we get out into the world, the task becomes much greater. We know, for example, that the conventional timber industry devastates forests, speeds the loss of biodiversity, and causes erosion and flooding of critical watersheds. 1/3 of the world's forests have been cleared for logging and conversion to agriculture, and they are shrinking each year by an area equal to the size of Portugal. Tropical rainforests are being cleared at the rate of 1 hectare, 2.47 acres, per second, and half the tropical forest is now lost. We can try to stop this clear-cutting, particularly of old-growth forest, through activism, lawsuits, or electing the right politicians, but it doesn't get to the root cause. As long as a demand exists for forest products, the forest will be cut, and if we continue to demand petroleum and whale meat, we will eventually drill for oil in our wildlife refuges and whales will continue to be harvested. As a company we work on reducing our dependency on non-renewable resources until which time we can switch over to a less harmful material. We try to use only recycled paper and wood products, and we use alternative building materials for all our retail outlets and office buildings. We use wood only when nothing else will work, and then it is used, remilled wood or virgin wood from sustainable sources. In contrast, our government's solution to our dwindling forests is to subsidize the logging and paper pulp industries and promote tree farms as a sustainable practice. Frame houses made with 2x4s and 2x6s would never be built if we had to pay the true cost of lumber. In Europe, no one builds with wood because it makes far inferior buildings, and the governments don't subsidize the industry. We're examining various options for construction of a new 3-story office building in Ventura. I'm excited about one method that uses a totally different process. This type of building construction is fireproof, earthquake-proof, mildew-proof, termite-proof, and energy-efficient and costs 25% less than a conventional building. It doesn't use any wood except for trim and window frames. It makes for a superior building in every way, and it's made from straw bales, a waste product. The fact that it's a more environmentally sustainable method is an added value. It's been estimated that with the amount of rice straw that is burned in the United States, you could build 5,002,000 square foot houses a year. Any company environmental philosophy should also include the encouragement of employee participation at home. For example, while Patagonia has a tithing program to support environmental causes, we also have a matching funds program to encourage our employees to donate to their own favorite environmental and social groups. To encourage better fuel economy and to support the development of alternative vehicles, the company pays $2,000 toward any employee's purchase of a hybrid gas-electric car. We also allow employees to bring their home goods in for recycling. In 1989, our Salt Lake City staff took this commitment one step further by opening their parking lot as the first recycling station in the entire state of Utah. Employees are empowered to get involved at all levels, either individually or as a group or department. They have the right to use company time to participate in Patagonia's environmental programs and to innovate new ones, as long as their regular jobs are properly done. As an example, we recently had a big chunk of land in Nevada declared a wilderness, and this happened during the Environment Bush administration. It began when we moved our warehouse from Ventura to Reno, Nevada, and many of our Ventura people decided to move too. When they got there, they realized that although Nevada had a lot of wild country and is 83% federal land, it didn't have much designated and protected wilderness. So they did an inventory of land and found 12 million acres that qualified. They started with the easiest, the Black Rock Desert area. 4 employees came to us and said, "Look, if you continue paying our salaries and give us a desk, we think we'll have a wilderness bill within a couple of years." They joined up with the Nevada Wilderness Coalition, had both of Nevada's U.S. senators sponsor the bill, and went back to Washington and lobbied. As a result, 1.2 million acres of wilderness were protected for about 10 cents an acre. In 2004, the coalition added another 768,000 acres of new wilderness. In the mid-1990s, 4 people were arrested in a protest to save California's Headwaters Forest, a magnificent collection of ancient redwood groves threatened by harvesting. They were part of Patagonia's internship program, which allows employees to leave their jobs for up to 2 months to work for an environmental group and still receive their Patagonia paychecks and benefits. Under certain circumstances, the company will also post bail for those who have taken a class in civil nonviolent disobedience and are subsequently arrested in support of environmental causes. When a government is breaking or refusing to enforce its own laws, then I believe civil disobedience is the rightful course of action. If you ask people today what they want for their children, they'll say they want to leave the world a better place, and they want to give their kids the things they didn't have when they were growing up. But people aren't making the choices necessary to make this rosy future happen. Part of the reason no one will act is that people perceive themselves differently from the way others see them. SUV owners are a good example. They know that their SUVs are a bad environmental choice for a vehicle, But they rationalize it by saying they only use them for short trips or for carrying lots of people and gear. Or that it's a matter of safety, even though it has been proved that SUVs are less safe. Besides, they say, it's just one car. Other people, however, see SUV owners as a big part of the problem. The governments we choose, and the policies they set, are partly to blame for the environmentally harmful choices Americans make. If oil weren't so heavily subsidized and we had to pay the true cost of gasoline, then SUVs wouldn't be in demand and wouldn't be manufactured. Everyone would be driving a hybrid or alternative fuel vehicle or advocating high-speed trains. But when we go to the gas pump, we don't pay for the environmental damage or for the cost to protect our oil interests overseas. Alternative or renewable fuel and energy sources can't compete with subsidized oil. Artificially cheap oil affects research and innovation in other industries as well. In a clothing business like Patagonia, where we use post-consumer recycled, PCR, polyester, it's still cheaper to buy new polyester produced from oil. But it won't be for much longer, as the world runs out of oil. When my generation was young, we were unaware that the health of our planet was endangered, and certainly no one imagined that one day a business would need an environmental as well as a financial policy. Not until Rachel Carson's book Silent Spring came out in 1962 did some of us awake from our torpor. Today most Americans are aware we are facing an environmental crisis. In surveys, 75% identify themselves as environmentalists. But you are what you do, not what you say you are. We continue to blame others, the Mexicans for having large families, the Chinese for burning high-sulfur coal, or the government for wanting to drill for oil in the Arctic National Wildlife Refuge. Meanwhile we drive around in our SUVs, shopping and consuming like good Americans so the economy doesn't go south. The thought is, I'm not the problem, therefore, I'm not the solution. For our government leaders, the environment occupies less than 5% of the political agenda. In fact, it was a non-issue in the election campaigns of 2004. Voters say they want a healthy planet to live on, but it's not proved at election time, when it takes a backseat to all the other issues like security, health care, the price of gasoline. It's even harder to solve our problems when our government is leading us in the opposite direction with subsidized logging, tax credits for resource exploitation and for gas-killing vehicles, subsidies for conventionally grown cotton and other non-sustainable agriculture, and the promotion of consumerism as the basis for our economy. Of course, our government agencies are not the ones that are actually out there drilling for oil or leaving manufacturing byproducts. Environmentally, most corporations are doing the bare minimum they have to in order to get by. They hire environmental attorneys to make sure they are in compliance with existing laws, some of which they helped write in the first place. Worse, they continually want to rewrite those laws in order to do even less. Profits and jobs take precedence over everything, and they use consumer demand as the reason for building environmentally bad products. Without laws, and watchdogs to see that the laws are enforced, they'll stop building those products only when the consumers ask them to, not before. The timber worker felling old-growth trees and the machinist making assault rifles for citizen use can't escape their responsibility because it's all about jobs or I just do what they tell me to. It's the old "the customer is king, and we are responsive to our customers' needs" excuse for not doing the right thing. As for their products, they believe in letting the market decide if they should exist or not. A company should be responsible not only for causing the least amount of harm to society and the environment in making its product but also for the product itself. For instance, automobile companies say they will stop making gas-killing SUVs when their customers demand them to change, but they don't educate their customers about the true environmental and social cost of owning SUVs. The difficulty of convincing people to act is evident from a walkthrough of Patagonia's own parking lots and offices. SUVs are studded all over the lot, and people are wearing jeans and shirts made from non-sustainable fibers grown with toxic chemicals. Even here, where everyone knows how bad all this stuff is, environmental values are a hard sell. One hopes that the kids coming out of our child care center will do better. No matter how diligent we are at Patagonia in trying to cause less harm to the environment with our business, everything we make causes some waste and pollution. So the next step in our responsibility is to pay for our sins until such a time that we hope we can stop sinning. Right after the OPEC-caused oil shortage of the early 1970s, Japan and industrialized countries in Europe put huge taxes on petroleum, forcing both nationwide conservation measures and the development of more efficient industries. The United States meanwhile did nothing of the sort, and we are paying the price. In the 3 decades since, the standard of living in the United States has doubled, but the standard of living in Europe has quadrupled. As for the quality of life, which measures clean air and water, education, health care, crime prevention, and other similar factors, the United States is now 10 countries down the list from the top. Another result of the long-term energy policies of those countries is that they can now produce industrial goods using far less energy than U.S. companies require. If the United States were to start taxing polluters, stop subsidizing such wasteful industries as oil, timber, and industrial agriculture, put levy taxes on all non-renewable resources, and correspondingly reduce the taxes on income, it would be the biggest step we could make toward becoming a sustainable society. Closer to home, if I really believe in such thinking, then Patagonia, which consumes these resources and pollutes, cannot wait for the government to change. We have to tax ourselves and use those monies to try to do some good. In the early 1980s we started pledging 2% of our profits, before taxes, to non-profit environmental groups, and we increased the amount as we became aware of more problems and the need for our support became greater. We reached a level of 10% of the company's profits, the maximum allowed as a tax deduction, in 1985. This became a sizable amount, as we were profitable and we always reinvested the profits in the company rather than take out bonuses and dividends. Since we're a private company, we were able to do the right thing without having to justify it to accountants and stockholders. When this 10% approach was formalized as policy, the company changed forever. In the late 1980s some other companies developed their own grants programs, and several matched our commitment to give 10% of their profits. But in some cases, their profits were artificially low. After incentives and bonuses were paid to upper management, on paper the profits were much less, and many high-volume companies with 10% pledges actually gave very little to non-profit groups. This practice violates the spirit of philanthropy. The idea is to give generously and not to find loopholes to avoid giving. We felt we were doing our share, and since others seemed to want to follow our lead, we decided to up the ante. In 1996 we pledged to give 1% of our sales, meaning that whether we made money or not, whether we had a great year or a bad one, we had to give. It became not so much charity as a self-imposed earth tax for living on the planet, using up resources, and being part of the problem. Democracy works best in small, homogeneous societies where everyone has to take responsibility for his or her actions. Peer pressure obviates the need for police, lawyers, judges, and prisons. You are responsible for your own and your parents' social security. Decisions are made by consensus and not by compromise. In the early days of our country and until the end of the 19th century, we had 3 powerful social forces: the federal government, local government, and civil democracy. Of the 3, I would argue that civil democracy has been by far the most powerful. Activists were responsible for breaking away from Britain in the first place. Civil democracy, funded by private philanthropy, fueled the 2 great social movements of the 19th century, the abolition of slavery and the struggle for women's rights. Creating Yosemite National Park was not Teddy Roosevelt's idea, it was the activist John Muir who talked Roosevelt into ditching his Secret Service men and camping under the redwoods. African American women and children who refused to sit in the back of segregated buses and stood up to the federal marshals finally forced the government to enact civil rights legislation. Anti-war activity stopped the war in Vietnam. If you read a newspaper on any given day, you will see that most of the gains we are making as a society are still being done by activist citizens organizations. These activists are taking politicians and CEOs to court for their malfeasance. They are forcing corporations to clean up sweatshops, sell only sustainably harvested wood, recycle their computers, and cut down on toxic wastes. Citizen kayakers and fishermen work to bring down the obsolete dams and let the rivers flow. Falconers brought the peregrine falcon back from near extinction. Duck hunters have done the most to protect waterfowl in North America. People may be afraid of the term activist because they associate it with eco-sabotage and violent protests, but I'm talking about normal citizens who want the government to live up to its obligation to protect our air, water, and all other natural resources. Activists have infectious passion about the issues they support, whether they are mothers fighting to clean up toxic landfills that are killing their children or farmers losing their fourth-generation family businesses to urban sprawl. These are the people on the front lines, trying either to make the government obey its own laws or to recognize the need for a new law. That's why our earth tax, 1% of our net sales, goes primarily to them. I've learned from a lifetime of being outdoors that nature loves diversity. It hates monoculture and centralization. 1,000 activist groups, each working on a specific problem that it's passionate about, can accomplish much more than a bloated organization or government. Whom do you trust to protect the remaining 5% of old-growth forest and the few remaining healthy salmon streams left in North America? The Forest Service? State and local governments? Corporations like Pacific Lumber or Weyerhaeuser? I don't trust any of them. The only ones I trust are small grassroots citizens organizations made up of people willing to tree sit for months or stand in front of bulldozers. We need the river keepers, the baykeepers, the forest guardians, and the protesters who chain themselves to the front doors. Worldwide, more than 100,000 non-governmental organizations, NGOs, are working on ecological and social sustainability. In the United States alone, over 30,000 nonprofit organizations are addressing such issues as biodiversity conservation, women's health, renewable energy, climate change, water conservation, trade laws, population growth, and wilderness protection. The fact that they all have arisen independently, without any common institutional framework, is a tremendous statement of the extent of the environmental crisis. Many of these grassroots organizations are far more capable of solving problems than are self-serving multinational corporations or government agencies. Most of them are local groups working long hours with minimal resources, and they are hanging on to existence by the thinnest thread, depending on small donations and fundraising events like benefit auctions and bake sales. Our financial contributions to activist causes have been significant. Between 1985 and 2005 we gave $22 million in cash and in-kind donations, but I've always thought we should provide them with more than just dollars. Among our other programs and in-kind assistance, Patagonia holds a Tools for Grassroots Activists conference every 18 months, where we teach activists the organizational, business, and marketing skills small groups need to survive in a competitive media environment. This is one of the most important services Patagonia provides. These people are often isolated, scared, and bravely passionate, and most of them are woefully unprepared to confront big business or big government with their teams of attorneys and hired experts. By giving them the tools to present their position clearly and effectively, we do as much good as by giving them financial support. Such efforts have incurred the wrath of conservatives, of course. In 1990 we were the target, along with 24 other companies, of a sophisticated boycott orchestrated by the Christian Action Council, CAC, because of our regular support of Planned Parenthood. Despite receiving thousands of letters from people saying they would never again buy our products, We coordinated a unified response from all the targeted companies, everyone much larger than Patagonia. When we were threatened by the CAC with groups picketing our stores, we relied on a strategy called Pledge a Picket. We said that we would reward every picketer who showed up at one of our stores by donating $10 to Planned Parenthood in his or her name. They chose to stay away, and the boycott collapsed. We were described in the New York Times as courageous, and we then received thousands of letters from Planned Parenthood supporters. In 1993 we busted a similar boycott attempt aimed at undermining our support of forest protection groups. We've had a few employees who didn't approve of the company's political beliefs and were greatly offended by our giving grants to family planning organizations. My answer is that they shouldn't be working for any company that they don't believe in, whether it's because of the product, like tobacco, or what the company does with its profits. And many new employees ask why Patagonia gives mostly to environmental causes, while, it would appear, we ignore social causes. The answer, I tell them, as well as the answers to nearly all the questions the company faces, can be found in the philosophies. In this case, the answer is found in the environmental philosophy itself. Focus on the causes, the philosophy tells us, not the symptoms. Our support of Planned Parenthood is an example. While that organization appears to be working strictly on social problems, Planned Parenthood actually works at the single greatest cause of our environmental problems, overpopulation. The countries with the greatest human misery are the ones with the highest birth rates. They are also the poorest countries. They are poor because the natural environment has been destroyed, as in Haiti or Rwanda. Even at a subsistence level, people clear trees for fuel and shelter and disturb habitat to grow food and build a house. Poor people, especially among formerly agricultural societies forced in increasingly large numbers to concentrate in cities, pollute and waste the natural world because they have no choice. Their soil and groundwater have been depleted, the rivers are dry or polluted, the aquifer drained. Their birth rate will naturally go down when their quality of life goes up, just as it has in most developed countries. But a quality life won't happen until they can bring back the productivity of the land, until they start working with nature instead of against it. When Melinda and I made the decision to stay in business, we faced a personal challenge. Could we run a company that does much good and very little harm? Could we turn the company into a model, capable of effecting reform that we as individuals would be unable to accomplish? Could we actually change the way others treat the natural world? The environmental crisis is too big for one company, or 10 companies, or 100 companies. If Patagonia can continue to be successful operating under the constraints of our environmental philosophy, then we perhaps can convince other companies that green business is good business and they can gain the confidence to take a few steps in the right direction. With luck, this will lead other companies toward being part of the solution to the world's problems. There are encouraging signs. Just as in the organic food industry, which is currently growing at a rate of over 20% a year, the worldwide demand for organic cotton is booming. It has tripled since we first made the switch in 1996. The farmers, gins, spinners, weavers, and cloth manufacturers that followed our lead all have created a new source of revenue for themselves. The costs of organic cotton have gone down to where it is on average only 2 times more expensive than industrial grown, and more companies, encouraged by us, are switching over. Several large companies like Nike, Levi's, and the Gap buy organically grown cotton to blend in with their industrial cotton as a way to support the organic movement but still not price themselves out of their established markets. Some of the fiber mills we work with, at our prodding, are actively working on using less toxic materials and processes, like eliminating antimony and methyl bromide in polyester and trying to find a way of closing the loop with nylon 6 polymers. They willingly work with us because they believe that what we are attempting to do is going to create a more sustainable business model for them and for society. They realize, as David Brower put it, there's no business to be done on a dead planet. 1% for the Planet Alliance. If you want to die the richest man, then just stay sharp. Keep investing, don't spend anything. Don't eat any of the capital. Don't have a good time. Don't get to know yourself. Don't give anything away. Keep it all. Die as rich as you can. But you know what? I heard an expression that puts it well: there's no pocket on that last shirt. Susie Tompkins Buell. One full afternoon in 1999 I was fly fishing on the Henry's Fork of the Snake River with Craig Matthews, the owner of Blue Ribbon Flies in West Yellowstone, Montana. We had been having a discussion about our realization that besides the fact that our respective companies were dependent on the existence of wild places in the world, we shared the personal belief that a healthy natural world is essential for humankind's survival. For both those reasons we supported grassroots environmental organizations through our businesses, even though we had anticipated alienating customers by taking stands on controversial issues. The turning point of our conversation came when we realized that both our businesses had actually grown because of our radical stands. It seemed unlikely that it was coincidental or that we had somehow drawn a few more radicals out of the woodwork to buy from us. There was something else at work. Customers wanted to support companies that not only took a stand on the environment but also took that stand by donating to activists. The next part of our conversation was, how does a customer know which companies are donating to the environmental activists? We had both advertised our company's environmental stands, but it's not the kind of thing most businesses can put in their catalog, if they have one. It would cost more money to advertise their support than they could donate to causes. But what if there was a simple way to identify those companies, maybe a logo, like the Good Housekeeping seal of approval? Any business or individual could display it so that people would know where they stand on the environmental crisis. In 2001 Craig Matthews and I started an organization called 1% for the Planet, an alliance of businesses pledging to donate at least 1% of sales toward active efforts to protect and restore our natural environment. 1% for the Planet is an organization devoted solely to increasing the effectiveness of grassroots environmental organizations by giving them more funding. The intent of 1% for the Planet is to help fund these diverse environmental organizations so that collectively they can be a more powerful force in solving the world's problems. Here's how the alliance works. Each member company contributes 1% of its annual sales as tax-deductible donations to nonprofit environmental organizations. Members choose from a list of thousands of groups approved by and registered with 1% for the Planet. Each 1% member disperses its own contributions directly, which simplifies the decision-making process, minimizes bureaucracy, and encourages member companies to develop independent relationships with the groups they support. In return, member companies then use the 1% for the Planet logo to communicate their environmental commitment to their customers. The logo allows customers to distinguish easily between green marketing and true commitment. Joining 1% for the Planet identifies a company as one that understands that the environment is the foundation for all life on Earth, including human civilizations, and that a healthy environment is necessary for all forms of life to have a future. We chose 1% of sales because it's a hard number, not tied to variable profits, and it distinguishes us from companies who are using green marketing to promote their products. The vague declaration that a company is donating a percentage of sales or profits is meaningless. It could be $1 or $1 million. 1% for the Planet means donating at least 1%. You can give more. Blue Ribbon Trout Flies is our co-founder and, though small, gives 2%. Imagine if the president proposed that the next time you filed your income tax, the form had a place on the back where you could say, I want 15% to go to this and 10% to go to that. People would jump at the opportunity to say where their tax money goes. Right now you have no say, especially if your party isn't in power. But if you tax yourself first, in the form of a donation to activists, you say where it goes. Not many of us believe that our politicians or corporate moguls are going to lead us away from this apocalyptic environmental slide. It's going to take a revolution, And revolutions don't start from the top. 1% for the planet is a self-imposed tax for using resources, but it's also an insurance policy that we'll still be in business in the future. I'd like to be able to get companies to give just 1% to the environment and to feel the same commitment and satisfaction that Mormons feel when they give 10% of their incomes to their church every year. Their tithing assures the church will take care of them if they should lose the farm. For me, the solution to the world's problems is easy: we have to take action, and if we can't do it ourselves, we've got to dig into our pockets. The scariest moment is writing that first check, but you know what? The next day things go on, the phone still rings, there's food on the table, and the world is a little bit better. As Mahatma Gandhi said, you must be the change you wish to see in the world. Thank you and have a good day.